we must give her and her group of pals the VIP table reserved for celebrities. The trouble is, I own the restaurant and have no idea who this lady is. But I decided to play along and see what happened. During the dinner, one of the girls asked me whether I thought my life was meaningless because I worked as a waiter. That's when I realized all bets were out, and I was going to exact my retribution. This is what I did. This occurred around Christmas and New Year's. My grandparents emigrated to Canada from Italy in the 1970s and established a restaurant. When they died, my parents took over the restaurant, which they grew and enlarged throughout the decades. I've been working at the restaurant since I was 15. As my parents became older, they retired and became snowbirds, spending the winters in Florida. They sold the restaurant to me a few years ago, but they kept a tiny percentage of the stock as a supplementary source of income in addition to their savings. As soon as I took possession, I modernized the old place. I rebuilt the restaurant, altered the logo, and contacted local and national newspapers to place advertisements. I invited food critics, bloggers, and vloggers. It was slow at first, and I began to fear that the loan I took out to undertake all of this was the worst mistake I'd ever made, that I had ruined 3 generations of a family company. But soon, it began to work. A local semi-famous YouTuber included us in one of his videos, which prompted more people to visit and review us. Even on a Monday, we were quickly seeing 5 to 10 times the regular volume of activity. We became a destination for large events, and it was not uncommon for a celebrity to stop up on certain evenings. I even invited certain high-profile clients to visit and cook for our guests. This cost a fortune, so we were completely filled for the holidays. People had to make reservations in July to get a table in December. It took years to get to this point. When things become busy, I don't simply sit in the back office. I'm on the floor doing whatever needs to be done, whether it's greeting customers, bussing tables, or mopping the floors. On nights with high-profile guests or events, I wear a jacket and take charge. One night, 6 women walked in. 5 of them appeared to be in their early 20s, with the leader looking to be in her mid-20s. My best assumption was that she was an elder sister of one of the females or an older sorority sister to incoming college students. I was greeting them at the entrance, and as they approached, Queen Bee Karen was telling the baby Karens how fantastic this restaurant is, how delicious the cuisine is, and how there might even be celebrities there. When she approached me, she explained that she required a table for 6. I responded, "Of course, can I get the name on the reservation?" She stared at me. She responded, "Oh, I didn't make one, but it's okay. The owner is a personal friend of mine. He said he always keeps 1 or 2 tables open for special guests, and we can have one of those tonight." This is true for many high-profile restaurants, and I've been doing it recently as well. But I had no idea who this woman was, and she had never discussed any of this with me. I understood she was attempting to get in without a reservation, but she had chosen the worst person to try this with. I told her, "I am sorry, but we cannot seat anyone without a reservation. As you can see, we do not have any seats available." I didn't want to go all out and say, "I'm the owner, and we have never spoken before, so I never promised you anything." But I didn't want to embarrass her in front of the other girls she was with at the time. She then instructed one of the other girls to take a picture of me. She announced that she would speak with the owner and ensure that I was either scrubbing toilets or fired by the end of the week. The other girls behind her joined in, saying things like, "Yeah, kiss your minimum wage job goodbye." I wasn't sure if they were in on it with her or if they truly believed she knew the owner. Queen Bee Karen then said, "Look, you can either give us a table or I can make your life very difficult. This is not worth losing your job." She kept pointing, trying to belittle me, and then saying things like, "Obviously you aren't anyone here, because if you were, you would know who I am and never try to tell me anything other than yes or of course." She was constantly attempting to put me down and take that table. At this time, it had been a hard day for me, and from my perspective, I had 3 options. Number 1, I could inform her that I am the owner and call her out on all of this. Number 2, I could simply hand her the table and let things go. Or, third, I could teach Queen Bee Karen and her minions a lesson. I selected option 3. I smiled at her and said, "Of course, ma'am, please follow me." I handed her one of the 3 tables we leave free in case a celebrity walks in, which occurs occasionally. I told her, "I apologize for everything, and you're right, it would be simpler just to give you the table." I also assured her that the first 3 rounds of drinks would be free. I seated them down and personally served them. As they sat, I told them, "We need one of your credit cards and IDs just to keep on file, and we'll return them to you before you leave." Queen Karen handed me her card and informed the baby Karen minions, "Tonight is on me." I took their orders, gave them their free beverages, and informed them that due to how busy we were tonight, the meal may be delayed. The females only worried about the free drinks. They ordered 3 rounds and still hadn't received any food. They eventually called and asked me to check on it, all while giving me the worst attitude since they arrived. I told them I will look into it, but also asked if they wanted additional drinks. They ordered 2 more rounds. They were sloshed by the time the appetizers arrived, having done nothing but drink on an empty stomach for the majority of the night and just eating salads. As more food arrived, more beverages were ordered. What these girls didn't realize was that they were at our VIP table, which normally costs a few $1,000s to sit at, but I didn't charge them for it. Except for the first 3 rounds, I charged them for all of the extremely costly cocktails they had throughout the evening. Furthermore, the table they were sitting at, as previously stated, was VIP, thus the menus were different. Prices are not displayed on these menus. This is a restaurant industry trade secret. They also offered higher-end menu items such as white truffle, black caviar meals, and specially imported West Coast oysters, among others. At one point during the night, I honestly began to question what I was doing. I worried I was going too far with these poor girls. They might not know any better. But certain things encouraged me throughout the night, such as when one of the baby Karens questioned whether I thought my life was pointless because all I ever became was a server. Also, one of the other staff told me that they were planning how to mess with me, believing that they could do so whenever they wanted and that I would always give them a table. I overheard them say, "He's cute, but I wouldn't date a waiter like that. He is such a pushover." There were other comments like that throughout the night, so I continued with their life lesson. By the end of the night, each female had built up a bill ranging from $500 to $600. I handed Queen Karen the bill for $4,232.23, which included tax and tip. I've never seen somebody sober up this soon. She went from smiling and giggling with her buddies to almost in tears. She immediately summoned me over and asked whether this was a joke. I took the bill, looked it over, and apologized. "I'll get you the correct bill amount." Again, she seemed completely relieved, assuming she had received someone else's bill, and called me a effing idiot, before continuing to talk to her pals. When I returned to give her the right bill, she flipped out again. It was only a question. "Is there something wrong on this bill that you didn't order?" She and the girls were stunned and went over every single line of the bill, including the initial several lines that listed their original 3 rounds as complimentary. They then got out their phones and went over everything 100 times, adding it all up. Queen Bee, visibly startled, just remarked, "1 second, I need to use the restroom." Part of me feared she'd dine and dash and leave the baby Karens with the tab, but I discreetly reminded her that we had her ID and credit card, without making it too obvious. I was concerned that she would run out of money. 10 minutes later, she returns with new makeup, clearly crying, and tells me all about how poor the food was, how dreadful the drinks were, and so on, demanding that I at the very least cut the cost in half. She went on to say that the baby Karens would help, despite the fact that she had previously informed them that the night would be hers. Then, as if a light bulb went off in her head, she brought up her alleged relationship with the owner again, as if it would give me extra motivation to lower the amount in half. I smiled as I told her, "No, simply no. I can't change the bill." She takes out her phone and shows me a series of text messages from someone named after my restaurant, followed by the word owner. I instantly grasped what she had been doing in the bathroom, most likely changing one of the other Karen minions' contact names and erasing prior texts to establish this new script. I reviewed the messages and clicked on the contact information before telling her, "That's not the owner's cell phone number." Her response was, "He has multiple phones for business, of course. You do not know all of his numbers." I replied, "How about this? If we call him and he says it's okay to take 50% off the bill, then I'll do it." Her response was to begin ranting and screaming, which drew the attention of the few remaining patrons, and I knew it was time to finish this. I told her in a less conciliatory tone, "Cut the crap, little girl. You do not know the owner. You've never been here before, and if you continue ranting, I'll call the cops." Her tone changed as she attempted to defend herself as best she could. My response to her lame retort was, "My grandfather established this restaurant. My family has been running this establishment for centuries. I've worked here for nearly my entire life. I am the sole owner of this restaurant, and I have never seen you, heard of you, or made any promises to a stranger I have never seen before tonight." The little Karens were frozen and had no idea how to react. Queen Bee was in tears. I added, "Now, I provided you the table you wanted, one of these particularly reserved tables for high-end clientele, which I did not charge you for, as well as 3 rounds of free drinks. If you do not pay your account, I will call the cops and give them your identification." Karen signed the bill in tears, and the tiny Karens reached into their wallets to hand her whatever cash they had. which was probably a couple $100, with the promise to repay her more. 2 days later, an angry man arrives at my restaurant and requests that one of my bartenders talk with me. I was in the back office working, so he had to wait for about a half hour. She was with him too, but she kept her head down. I took them both to my office and showed him highlights from the security cameras, which had particularly high-quality audio because they were in the VIP area. We needed to keep good records in that region due to previous unconnected accidents. I showed him the majority of it, their remarks, orders, everything. When all was said and done, he rushed out with her, yelling at her the entire way. I have not seen or heard from any of them since, but the initial bill I gave them, which did not include the $120 oysters, is framed on my desk. As a side note, I did not lose as much money on the table in 3 rounds of drinks as you might expect. The table was intended to be empty anyway, so I didn't lose anything because I hadn't expected to gain anything in the first place. The cost of the meal and other drinks more than compensated for the loss in the first 3 rounds. So now that you know everything, am I the jerk? Probably the most astonishing thing about the Karens in this situation, aside from the money, trying to muscle their way into securing a seat and avoiding paying the bill, was their perspective on the world. That solitary statement concerning the OP's original poster's inadequacy as a waiter definitely stood out. It seems that OP was going to loosen up on his entire vengeance plan, but then one of the baby Karens asked him if he felt his life was meaningless because all he had become was a waitress. That has to be one of the most insanely entitled viewpoints we've ever seen on this channel. It may not be as exciting or insane as some of the other stories, but the fact that she actually sees the world in this way is simply sick. There is absolutely nothing wrong with having a job, regardless of the income. This occurs frequently with jobs such as janitors, and I despise it when individuals believe they are superior just because they do not work in those positions. There is nothing wrong with becoming a janitor. I don't understand that mindset, but in this situation, she not only feels that way, but she also wants to mock him for doing a difficult job, such as being a waiter. Or at least that's what she believes he's doing. One more thing. I'm happy this story ended on a somewhat gratifying note, with the father attempting to reverse the situation but becoming more enraged with his daughter than the restaurant owner. The only thing that scared me out was that the restaurant was recording audio of the folks sitting at that table. I would probably avoid going to a restaurant if I knew my talks were being recorded. Anyway, I'm glad it worked out for the OP, but please tell me how you would have handled the matter if it were your restaurant and these were your customers. Was the OP a jerk or not, and why? I discovered my wife's affair during her writing workshop, hired a P1, gathered evidence, and vanished without a trace before she returned home. Though my friends call me AB, never Andy, I go by Andrew Baker. Every now and then there's a nasty drunk or uneducated man trying to act too familiar and calls me Andy. So Andy, what's your job? They probe. I reply, I made this neat little tool for cops to check drunk individuals from 40 feet away. They have even begun to link them to radars throughout town. That typically shuts them down. That gadget isn't real, though, should you still not know it yet. I obviously have not much tolerance for stupidity. Lie to me, and things go bad. I'm a straightforward guy, not complicated at all. I am content in my career and lead a simple life. I am an engineer employed by a large national corporation with offices scattered over the nation. I have pals, and although I'm not a heavy drinker, I do have a sporadic beer. Though that's my struggle, honestly I tend more toward nachos. I try to keep myself in reasonable form for my age since, if I let it spiral out of hand, I will gain weight. Every chance I had, I used to go sailing. Now, having a wife and 2 small girls takes up a lot of time. I sold the yacht at last. That was only one of the concessions I have voluntarily given over the years in order to spend quality time with the individuals truly important to me. For 25 years, Karen and I have been contentedly married. Her level of education is high school teacher. Right now our 2 girls are at college. While her younger sister Denise is in Boston University, Claire is a student at Brown University in Rhode Island. I most certainly couldn't afford those pricey universities, but fortunately the girls are committed students with outstanding scholarships. Our house is in North Carolina, more precisely the Research Triangle. It revolves on some outstanding Raleigh institutions and is flanked by first-rate high-tech businesses. One may live and work here quite nicely. Though it would just make me hungry, I could tell you about Carolina BBQ. When the daughters chose institutions up north, I was a little let down, but I know they had to venture beyond their comfort zone, and that is eventually a good thing. Our daughters are wonderful, smart, humorous, lovely young women with strong moral principles. Though I am daily concerned about their safety, I have faith in their judgment. Seeing children mature and start their path towards independence meant that my wife and I could at last have some alone time once more. For some time, I had been excited about this stage. I pictured going home every evening to a loving wife who would concentrate on me, and vice versa, with both girls away at college. I saw us picking back up our relationship and having happy days. It resembled almost exactly being newlyweds once more. We could have dinners out, go to movies and plays, and at last rediscover each other the way I had always wanted. But reality turned out very differently than I had imagined. To be honest, thinking back on that first year of an empty nest, I saw Karen changing. Her hobbies seemed to be changing. Although the change was slow, in time it became increasingly clear. At first, I saw these as her means of blossoming. Now our girls were no longer living with us. But finally I came to see that her priorities and values were undergoing a major change. English teacher Karen specializes in creative writing. She is, fairly speaking, a frustrated writer as well. She never really had the opportunity to write as she desired, being a teacher and young mother. Karen writes during the summer and whenever she could spare an hour or two, but so far not much has come out of it. She liked to compile rejection letters after sending her essays and short tales to literary publications. Her ideal magnificent masterwork was never realized. Though as a writer she has never ventured beyond predictable and perhaps too theatrical tales, I will admit I enjoy reading her. She has a romanticized view of what a writer should be, and covertly I believe she is more drawn to the concept than the actual work. Still, I'm happy too if she is happy. Karen has belonged to several writing clubs most of our marriage. Aiming to help each other's writing, these are meetings of people who come together to offer comments, ideas, and conversations about their work. While some of these organizations seem to be more like clubs of mutual adoration, others seem really useful to me. Her last group, the one she belonged to when everything broke down, contained components of both. They alternated visiting each other's houses, and during their encounters here, I would try to give them privacy. I tried once but stopped since Karen and a few others objected. There are about 10 people in Karen's present writing group, men as well as women. While some of them I could live without, others I enjoy. When you meet them, half of them really are relatively average and the other half really stand out. For example, the Lady Reggie is rather passionate in creating biographies and history. She still manages to captivate readers despite doing scholarly-oriented book writing and serious research. I have loved reading all of her works. Betty likes to write fantasy. She tends more toward the talking unicorn type than I would have her as the next J.K. Rowling. She's nice, and her writing seems to be mostly for her own enjoyment. Who can dispute that? Bill takes on the group's know-it-all function. Apart from that, he appears all good. A bit of that goes a long way. Then Frank comes in. The first time I saw him, I felt scared. Ever since, those alarms have kept ringing in my head. It was very evident when I met Frank that I was being introduced to him rather than the other way round. Examining me, he asked, "So Andy, what's your profession?" I looked at my wife. She shook her head and somewhat frowned. I said simply, "I'm an engineer." Frank gave no smile, more of a smirk in reply. Though not precisely out of earshot, I said I had given up trying to interact with their group and preferred to keep rather hidden and quiet. Until they forget, I usually find myself in the next room silently working or on the rear porch with a window open so I could hear their talk. Frank seems to share private jokes and a connection that makes me uneasy when he talks to Karen. Early on I found. He occasionally makes her ego stronger and other times seems as though he understands her inner thoughts in a way I value less. He mentions past talks that seem to be only between them, and I get the sense that the rest of the group doesn't recall those times. Although it's only a feeling, I have informed her I find it unpleasant. She dismisses my worries, and I know not to press the topic. She knows my feelings, the rest is up to her. During its sessions, the group performs a set ritual. Their work session ends with some wine and relaxation. It was during this period that I came to see some of them were just acting. It took place in the midst of the spring semester, close to early March, when the subject turned to the way actual writers lived. Oh, you know, all the eminent writers were alcoholics. That's right, they drank in the afternoons and evenings and penned in the mornings. It awakens the mind to fresh concepts and helps one to relax. Their creative ideas then start to flow in the mornings and they start writing. Actually, the really great writers all went through love relationships. That's the real inspiration for them. Frank was saying just that. Thanks for providing, Frank. I'm beginning to get your perspective. Karen's words then really hit me like a gut punch. Indeed, exactly. The real inspiration is found in the intensity and the thrill of the unknown. That is, in keeping it all secret from everyone else. I persuaded myself it was only a joke as some of them laughed and others didn't. Still, I listened in on their chat all through the evening. Maybe we should all have a wild night of passion sometime and then each write the next great American novel. Bill had that. I wasn't sure if he meant it humoristically or not. Not great writing comes from character defects. Features like humanity, empathy, and facing the riddles of the unknown really help to create great stories. I said before that Betty appealed to me. Memorable tales are about conquering obstacles, aiming for excellence in spite of all the odds, and leaving the planet in a better condition than it was in before. Well, perhaps if you conjure the right enchantment, we can avoid all the hassle. Again, that was that jackass Frank. To their shame, some in the group seemed to find that humorous. I had a hunch Reggie didn't either, and I'm not quite sure Betty did. They were debating writer drinking practices and affairs, and I kept listening without offering anything. Then I overheard a fascinating bit of their chat. Is anyone else planning to apply for the Illinois Writer Workshop this summer? Frank was now speaking once more. Oh, I turned in my application already. Keeping my fingers crossed will help them to accept me. 6 weeks of just writing and talking with other authors could truly change things for me. This was Karen. I had never heard of her before. Frank caught it up straight immediately. I am sure they will welcome you. Your work has improved really dramatically this past year. I think you will get admitted. I've also applied. I'm not as sure I'll be in though. My own feeling of internal radar for stupidity was off target. Frank, really, when did you start to get so modest? Though at this point I still loved and trusted my wife, I didn't like what I was hearing. Trust is basic when you have been married for the length of time we have. You ask not, is she up to no good? Not even cross your head the idea. Your mate is your other half. Marriage is a partnership. She has proved her dedication year after year. All you really want is for her to discover the success and happiness she so deserves, or at least that is what you think. Later on though, everything falls apart when you find your confidence has been betrayed. Update 1. I let myself ignore the overheard exchange from that evening over time. As I said, I trusted my wife entirely. Some younger males might not understand it, but trust becomes a way of life rather than only a decision after being married for more than 20 years. Late April found me finishing some outside gardening when I decided to call it a day and head indoors. Reaching for the kitchen door, I discovered my wife on the phone exclaiming, I can't wait, 6 whole weeks without any responsibilities, no commitments, and no one waiting for me to get back. At the last bit I started to perk. I stopped in front of her and listened. Absolutely, those 6 weeks will be the most self-indulgent of my life. I owe it to myself, you too owe it to yourself. Not one of these appealed to me. I walked through the kitchen opening the door. Karen appeared shocked. Well, I have to sprint. AB is here and I have to start cooking dinner. She grabbed fast. I said, who was that on the phone? Oh, just Regina. We were discussing the shortly closing of schools. Like heck it was, I said. I wanted to probe her about some of her remarks, particularly one about no one waiting for me to come home, but I realized that tonight the truth might be in scarce supply. Though I tried to hide it for the moment, my attitude worsened. Dinner later that evening, the other shoe dropped. AB, the amazing news I got today will not surprise you. Recall that Illinois Writer Workshop for which you applied? Come on, you hardly pay attention to me. To be honest, I had heard about the workshop before. But that was only because I had overheard her talking about it over a month ago. I don't remember you stressing it. Sure, I did. I applied for a 6-week workshop for authors. At the University of Illinois, it falls mid-June through late July. Their lecturers give lectures. They also bring in eminent authors for seminars and debate forums. We then get rather busy writing. I was accepted and this is an amazing chance. That sounds excellent, honey. We could certainly handle it financially. Perhaps I might join you and take a little time off from work. I would really enjoy listening to those authors speak. Her response appeared odd. Well, we can think about it. I won't have much free time to spend with you over the very demanding 6 weeks. My gut was tingling once more. Well, you know I'm not exacting. I could be the group's coffee guy. She gave a really tense smile. That may be lovely, darling. Let us monitor things. Such deflections have come from both sides. I knew what they meant. She was making sure I wouldn't wind up traveling to Illinois with her. I get the sense you would rather I didn't go with you. Oh no, it is not like that. I merely worry you might find it boring. You're into computers and circuits, and this is basically writers discussing major concepts. I kept that to myself. Back off, I thought. When I was being excluded, I knew. I said, ending the discussion, I'm sure you'll excel. After Karen retired to bed later that evening, I checked our phone records online. AITA provides that capability. All incoming and outgoing calls as well as text messaging are logged. When I looked over the phone log, the call I had cut off wasn't with Reggie. Or if it was, Frank's phone started it. When you find your wife lying and learning she has plans to exclude you, it's amazing how quickly trust can fall apart after a quarter century of marriage. Weeks went by, and she appeared fixated on the workshop's talks. She rejected the idea every time I tried several times to talk about maybe visiting at some time or going with her. She next moved from rationalizing to manipulating. AB, I have some interesting news. Late June saw me get you and Jake 2 passes to a fishing camp in northern Canada. You can take Jake, and both of you will love fishing for those large brown fish you constantly mention. Although it was very costly, I wanted to show thanks for your understanding of the writer's workshop. And I felt a little bad since you wouldn't be having fun, hence I want you to go and have a fantastic time. We may then discuss our experiences when I get back. Something didn't seem right. Thanks, sweetheart, that shows consideration of you. To be honest, I would enjoy your company more. AB, we have seen this. Simply said, it makes no sense. I will be working all through. I would feel guilty ignoring you in such a manner. I looked at her face and eyes momentarily, trying to make sense of it. Was it contempt? Thanks, honey. Canada seems entertaining. My voice was devoid of energy. I was mentally organizing my choices. A surprise trip to Illinois took the front stage. Well, you could at least say it while grinning. Those tickets cost a lot of money, so you should be glad. Sure, sounds fantastic. To tinker for the evening, I descended to the basement. Our ancient house had one of those floor grates in the corridor. Originally, the first floor was heated by it, allowing warm air to pass from the furnace room. I first made a point not to step on it inadvertently, but with time I grew used to it and forgot about its existence. There is also the phone in the hall. I was quietly working in the basement, thinking about what to do when I heard Karen on a call. Yes, I handed him the passes. He remains unsure. I keep telling him he won't love it. I'm not sure exactly. No, I cannot merely advise him against showing up. I want it too, but I also want to stay married later on. I simply need him to allow me some time to enjoy myself over a few weeks. I have earned it, I am due. I do want those weeks with you as well. All fine, let us wait a while. I believe he will show up. All right, darling, I miss you too. For me tonight, write something outstanding. She cut off the call with that. I got a lump in my throat. I'm not naive. I hear cheating and know it's not good. Karen either was thinking about or in an affair. Anything less, and she would still have a lot of work to do explaining. It took me 20 minutes to collect my ideas, but I decided that for now I had to start acting like the kind of liar I've always hated. At least for the moment I had to hide my goals until I had a strategy. In a very loving voice I said, Karen, I'm heading over to see Jake and give him the good news, as I phoned upstairs. Oh, that's fantastic, darling. Enjoy, she said. And I was out the basement door exactly like that. I required distance. Seeing Jake was only a pretext. Thinking about it, I knew I needed someone to confide in. And Jake had been my closest buddy from early life. You're kidding me, Jake responded, not dodging around the issue. No way, I won't buy it. She would never turn on you, AB. Well, she's certainly working hard to keep me away from that workshop, and she's calling someone baby, and it's definitely not me. We merely sat there, silent. Most men want from a friend simply sitting with them and sharing the suffering. You have to talk to her about this, AB. Assuming the worst without knowledge of the truth will not help you through the next few months. And what is she likely to say? When I review the phone records tonight, how much would you want to wager that Frank was not the one she spoke with? Frank she called baby, and Frank she's plotting with wasn't Frank. I am not laying that bet. What then is your intended course of action? I'm going to grab a seat and have a frank conversation. After 25 years of marriage, that's what you do. I'll tell her I love her, let her know I'm offended she doesn't want me to travel with her, and I'll ask her straightforwardly what she's up to, that she doesn't want me there. Do you suppose she would tell you the truth? No, but I'll tell her the truth, even if some of it isn't what she wants to hear. She'll know how much I love her. She will understand that cheating on me will destroy our relationship. She will then most likely try to persuade me that I should simply go fishing since I am seeing things. I stopped just for a moment. By the way, 1 ticket is for you. I have 2 for a fishing camp in northern Canada in late June. Nice, Jake said, catching himself. I mean, friend, here I am to help you. I laughed a little bit. I have always known exactly where his allegiance resides. Before I left for home, we spoke, exchanged ideas, and drank a few beers for 3 hours. I opened up about practically everything. After dinner, asking Karen to come sit with me in the living room. I pushed back a few things. Sweetheart, I have some quite major worries. About the writer's workshop, I don't think you have been quite open with me. You mentioned it to me only once you had already scheduled a trip, even though I overheard you talking about it with your writer group back in March. I have to admit, I didn't find it funny when you mentioned how common affairs are among brilliant authors. Frank and you have been talking about your vacation, but when I ask, you lie and say it's someone else. You know how I feel about that guy. Then, when you told me you were accepted, you seemed deliberately aloof and discouraged me from participating. Though I am not here, I wanted to partake in this fascinating trip with you. Rather than thinking about it, you set plans for me to be somewhere else without even talking to me. Just committing on my behalf. You seem to be attempting to make sure I won't be around when you're in Illinois. You haven't been quite honest with me, hence I'm beginning to wonder if you have been entirely loyal. AB, I would never be dishonest with you and I have never treated you that way. What has drawn you in? Being your husband, all I want is for you to have fun. That you could believe something like that about me truly hurts. I have no control over my emotions or what sets things off. You know, I love you. Since our first meeting, I have loved you. Nevertheless, I cannot just ignore the concept of treachery. Are you hoping for that, Karen? Is this writer's workshop your haven from our marriage? Update 2. Our dialogue came to an end with that. Not more loving or sympathetic conversation. She started screaming and spent the remainder of the evening either shouting or silently. And for the next week, it was silent. She was trying to get me to turn back down by applying the silence treatment, thereby punishing me. It did not work though. Actually, it reinforced my beliefs solely. But I knew I wasn't moving in this direction, and finally I let her think she had achieved success. Not much I could do to stop her from cheating if she intended to do so. The phone call I listened in on even hinted she might have done it already. I finally thanked her for the vacation to Canada, but my attitude stayed dark until the trip was finished. She changed her attitude fast and behaved like a devoted wife to support the behavior she wanted from me once she had what she wanted. She seemed to flick a switch, which just made me more suspicious. When I am the recipient of manipulation, I know it is happening. I asked a colleague who he consulted when he suspected his wife of cheating. The Illinois Writers' Workshop was just 500 meters away and I knew none there. I took his advice and the person he suggested was Illinois-based. I contacted them asking for help. The fact that this session occurred on a state university campus made its location favorable. Although they couldn't take part in the program, the PI's agents could roam the campus and monitor the rooms as needed. The participants would eat in the university cafeterias, go to nearby clubs, and share a big dorm with other students. This gave room for covert monitoring. With modern tools, some of these kids would actually be working for me. Our daughters decided to stay in their colleges for the summer to work in research labs under their professors as the school year was drawing to a conclusion. We were still empty nesters then. I deliberately tried to invite her to dinners made at home and show her around. She appeared to be enjoying everything, hence I began to think I was improving. But every time I told her I loved her, I felt her dismissive I know attitude. The fragments of the puzzle came together gradually. She had merely taken me for granted, not stopped loving me. I knew her safety net was consistent and familiar. She knew she could go away, find thrills, break off our marriage, and I would be waiting when she got back. This insight brought my ideas into line. I knew I couldn't leave things unanswered the day she left. Her shuttle for the airport came as we stood close to the door. I begged and said, "Please don't do anything that could ruin us," tightly gripping her. She flashed me an annoyed glance in answer and retorted, "I'm tired of you not trusting me. We will have a major discussion about this when I get back." She snatched her luggage, kissed me quickly on the cheek, and hurried for the shuttle. She left without ever looking back at me. I sensed then that my marriage was about to end. After 25 years and our 2 grown kids, it seemed our relationship was going away with little notice. The private investigator did his work really well. He said they were in an unfamiliar area, so they didn't bother covering their acts. Karen has to have taken off her wedding bands on the plane since they vanished off her finger when she arrived at the studio. She claimed freely to be newly divorced, and Frank and my wife started to be inseparable right away. They were together all the time, kissing, holding hands, and behaving as passionate high school students would have. My PI cleverly set a tiny video camera in their dorm hallway. Karen and Frank only used one of their designated rooms, although each had one. Sometimes her chamber, sometimes his, but always they stayed late together. Although I knew what was happening in those shared dorm rooms, my PI and his crew went to considerable measures to verify my suspicions. Frank and my wife left early one evening before it was dark. Two agents, looking like normal college students, sat against the corridor wall and surreptitiously slipped a tiny fisheye camera under the door. Frank was seen in action for 20 minutes using this gadget. The video quality was shockingly clear, and he clearly hadn't used protection when he finished. That for me was the last straw. I was clearly done with this marriage. Anything else the team found served only as more proof to support my position. Regular updates from my private investigator kept me informed, but after that first week her future was obvious and my decision was taken. Beginning the early days of her workshop, I spent time implementing my plan. I wanted to be virtually invisible, almost ghostly. I would have vanished and there would be no turning back. No falsehoods, no ultimatums, no protracted negotiations, explanations, justifications, or attempts at reconciliation when she got back. The sole outcome would be divorce. My marriage was about to fall apart. Though it does not fade fast, what is love without trust? An unfaithful wife cannot define a future. Some could contend that my answer was weak. They could advise she deserves horrible humiliation, physical punishment, and total poverty. Ultimately, though, the law would forbid me from pursuing any of that, and I had no intention of ruining the rest of my life by seeking such cruel revenge on my adulterous wife and her lover. Eliminating the one thing she always depended on, the consistent presence that comforted, encouraged, uplifted, and inspired her, would be my payback. I was walking away from myself. Frank lacked suitability for a catch. Long term, he was unable to meet her needs. Where would a 50-year-old divorced mother find emotional stability in love? I not give a damn. She no longer would be of interest to me. My private investigator would bring me more images, recordings, and proof of treachery by the person who promised me allegiance above all else every few days. The pictures and videos in the reports were very upsetting to view. The reports themselves were challenging to read. Especially when they covered me, the audio recordings were the toughest to handle. He is always emailing me about the fish he is catching and how incredible it is up there. Nearly every day he thanks me. She laughs. Frank joined in the laughing. He's clueless. You escape from his irritation by keeping him in the dark and treating him like a mushroom. He could as well have fun right now. I'll face that geek about his charges when I get back. How dare he continually charge me of cheating? But you are momentarily straying from our marriage, correct, beautiful? Alternatively, is another woman sleeping next night on my bed? She laughed at that, really. Well, I won't put up with that even if he may be onto something. Damn it, I'm a writer. His circuits and computer lingo are holding me back with their millimeters and micro thingamajigs. About huge ideas, what does he know? Update 3. As long as my existence stayed linked to hers, none of the several ways I considered for retribution would really satisfy me. One decision remained, and I started the process of separating from her. I explained everything honestly to my supervisor. Having gone through something like this personally not so long ago, he could appreciate it. He set up a transfer for me to show up at Portland, Maine, our corporate office. I thought the concept was interesting. I knew the folks there were professional, competent, and I liked their company. I found attractions in the town and the state as well. To get half of the furniture and all of my personal stuff up north, I booked movers. I checked that my automobile was in good condition for the trip, then spoke with a lawyer to start the divorce process. Regarding money problems, Karen had a retirement account and her own insurance. I made my daughters the beneficiaries and deleted her name from every one of my possessions. For no alimony, I signed a quitclaim deed turning the house over to her. She would keep her automobile but have to deal with her own insurance. Keeping my plans understated, I intended to handle credit cards and bank accounts closer to the finish. From that point ahead, I concentrated on strengthening my will. I meant to call her to show my love and to find out how the workshop was going. Hearing her lies would help me to get more convinced that my behavior was justified. She didn't let down anyone. She reacted with fervor, said her love, and went out to dinner in less than 2 minutes. Later on, my private investigator told me Frank was right next to her, mocking gestures and knowing glances, which just confirmed my choice. She clearly saw the matter as a joke, which validated my direction in life. Later on, I decided to text her instead of calling since I wasn't sure I could control my feelings over the phone. Though in reality I sent Jake and his wife on such vacations, I would tell her about great fishing excursions. They enjoyed themselves thoroughly. Regarding his marriage, Jake made a smart decision. They promised to see me and I did pay them a farewell visit before I left. Her 6-week workshop was ending, and I finished my last assignments. I put a for sale sign from a buddy who works as a real estate agent in the front yard. She was ignorant of that aspect, but I couldn't really sell the house without her permission. especially since I had already transferred ownership to her. Her first sight upon returning home would be the sign. To help the house seem less like a house, I changed the locks. I created a copy of the PI's report and chose specific pictures from her trip, including graphic stills from the video shot taken under Frank's door. To let her know she had been found out, I left all of this on the dining room table. The movers had already relocated most of my stuff. They would keep it until I needed it. I packed just 2 pieces of luggage, a briefcase, a laptop, and a guitar. I absolutely had to have my guitar. Something so valuable could not be trusted to anybody else. Frank could be engaged with my wife, but I loved my guitar very much. Knowing she wouldn't be back until late that evening, my first thought was to leave the next morning. I would be long gone when she showed up. But the evening before, I changed my mind. She could only wait and worry. I wanted her to feel the suffering right away. Along with the words "divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you," I emailed her 3 well-selected pictures of her with Frank. I chose one picture when they were almost close on the dance floor, obviously revealing she wasn't sporting her engagement and wedding rings. The second picture caught them holding hands as they entered his dorm room. The third was a crisp face-clear screenshot from the dorm room footage. She would see these pictures, and I hoped it would ruin her last beautiful night with Frank as they furiously looked for cameras that had already been taken down. Then I turned off my phone. Leaving the house our family had lived in for many years was a mix of grief, uncertainty, and newly acquired independence. All at once it seemed like the most difficult, uncertain, and freeing event of my life. My wife basically disappeared from my life. Though I hadn't personally caused it, it seemed as though she had died, not knowing the when or the why. The woman looking like my wife was someone I knew nothing about and I wanted no contact with. I was starting over and had no idea where I might be headed. Among the great loss, there was an unusual sense of emancipation. If only momentarily, the weight of dishonesty, treachery, and belittlement was offloaded from my shoulders. The sole expense was half of my life now unreachable. Late, but my mind was racing, so I drove almost 100 miles down the peaceful highway lost in contemplation till I came to a hotel for the evening. I was hoping for a real local breakfast restaurant, not for a chain motel. I searched for something real. I eventually found it and enjoyed what might be my final dish of grits for some time. My perspective changed and I started to rethink my path to Maine as I ate those grits. This signaled the beginning of my new life, and I had a long journey ahead. I had a 2-week window before employment began, so even if I could speed up my trip to Maine, fleeing my troubles, why accelerate? I needed time to gather my ideas, process her treachery, and let the past go. I decided to go gradually, enjoying the landscape on my northward drive and interacting with every state and its people as I passed through. My old life would give way to my new one this week. To be ready for a fresh start and clear myself of the ugly and blunders of my past, I meant to nurture my senses, including my taste buds. Wandering about Williamsburg among the summer throngs, the rest of the day was lost. I investigated the abilities of talented craftsmen and artists. I found somewhere to stay even though I had no reservation. My thoughts returned to my failing marriage only after a small dinner and settling in for the evening. She was probably going home about that time. Seeing the for sale sign on the front yard and knowing her keys wouldn't open the door, I wondered how she would respond. I traveled north along the winding roads toward Annapolis, Maryland's capital, the following day. Along Virginia's ancestral rivers, the York, Rappahannock, and Potomac, which go into the Chesapeake Bay, I passed through little villages and old estates. Ahead, there was one road stretch headed toward my destiny. I would follow that meandering road, which led me from betrayal to a new chapter in my life. Update 4. At last turned on my cell phone, I sat in my hotel room in downtown Annapolis. It was, predictably, full with many missed calls, emails, and text messages. A few came from friends, most of them came from Karen. Despite it being difficult, I read and listened to every one of them. That was a step that was absolutely vital. Indeed, Karen was trying to persuade me that things were not as they seemed at first. She sent those texts from Illinois before going back home, then saw the remainder of the pictures and perused the PI's report. My pals were letting me know, meanwhile, that Karen was trying to find me by contacting everyone. She was looking in all the wrong places, little knowing it. Although Jake and his wife knew, I decided to deliberately keep the rest in the dark. Once I had been established, I would let them know. I knew immediately that I could not spend eternity ghostly. 2 calls from my girls started to worry me. Karen had gotten in touch with them trying to track me. As I wanted to do it in person, I had deliberately not notified them about my choice to leave their mother. I gently explained the matter to my daughters, though, since I cannot let them worry. Their mother could do such a thing, which infuriated them and made it difficult for them to believe. For this reason, I emailed them the identical images I had shown Karen the evening I left home together with the PI's report. They promised then not to tell their mother about my activities. One more missed call. My attorney told me Karen had been formally served with divorce papers. She knew now that I intended business. Frank's wife had also got a whole set of pictures, films, and audio recordings from his 6-week program. For Frank, that was a karma dosage. Driving over northern Maryland on the 3rd day of my trip, I eventually arrived at New Jersey. Well, not exactly with much enthusiasm. I entered New Jersey but stopped just before I arrived in Connecticut. Once in Connecticut, I spent several hours investigating some coastal historic towns. Though I had no particular objective, the architecture was so different from what I was accustomed to in North Carolina that I felt a strong sensation of being in a new place, both physically and emotionally, and avoided telling the authorities, but I spent an hour in Groton looking for as many submarines as I could. Those black fish are quite stealthful. Looking along the coast, I was reminded that those nuclear submarines cut a hole in the hull to refuel the reactor and subsequently weld the hull back together. Was that another way to describe my circumstances? Could the first step in rejuvenating my life be Karen's treachery, which ripped a hole in my heart? Once I started down a new path, could I heal myself? The next day when I got up, I knew it would be the toughest day thus far. Following a filling breakfast of eggs, bacon, bread, and a robust cup of black coffee, I prepared myself for a challenging chat with my eldest daughter, Claire, at Brown. The drive there took little time, and I was at her dorm about late morning. We agreed to postpone our talk a little so she could act happy for an hour or two. She showed me around the university, then brought me to the cafeteria, where she met her friends. These were exactly the kind of young men and women I had hoped she would surround herself with, friendly, attentive, and apparently supportive. I pulled Claire's roommate aside on our way out and told her Claire had a difficult day. She was supposed to watch my daughter. "Oh sure, Mr. Baker," she said. "She shared it with us last night. Here among us are all her supporters." Yes, my daughter had made sensible friend choices. Claire and I stayed in her dorm room talking for hours. I showed her pictures and played audio recordings I never would have imagined to expose to one of my kids. Her feelings swung from grief to rage. Mom would do that is beyond unbelievable. Is she the same person who raised us at all? She has become what kind of nasty person? Though I could relate to her, at that moment I had to step in. Claire is your mother whatever she does. And keep in mind that I, not you, she has betrayed. Sorry, Dad, but she broke my soul family. I am definitely affected by this. I couldn't contradict that. We kept talking all afternoon, and I showed her my ideas. I urged her to get her friends together, and we had dinner at the greatest restaurant in town, or at least the one within my means. Everyone seems to have delighted in a departure from the standard dining hall cuisine. I related tales of my own college eating experiences, and I believe it helped them to see their own circumstances in a fresh light. That night I remained at a nearby hotel. The next morning I had breakfast with Claire, hugged her tearfully, and then traveled north to repeat the procedure. Claire has to have told Denise, as her response was far more under control than that of her older sister. Though less astonished, there remained dissatisfaction and resentment. She asked to view the supporting materials. I showed her. Her mother called coincidentally as we were chatting, and I sent her the universal sign for, "No, I'm not here." I shook my head, waved wildly, and copied a throat-cutting action. She knew Denise was always the family's more level-headed member. She then accomplished something I had never seen before. She said, "Dad phoned yesterday night, did he not? Is it true you have evolved into a lady who lies about cheating on her husband and engages in multiple partner involvement?" I stunned myself. Though at the same time I couldn't dispute the truth in her remarks, I wanted to chastise her for talking to her mother like that. "You heard, Mom. You stayed 6 weeks helping someone else while Dad was alone at home. Mom, was it well worth it? Was it worth going without your spouse?" Really, my daughter uses words rather brilliantly. Note to self, stay off her negative side. Not much more ground to cover. Denise told me that although her mother was primarily in tears and trying to provide apologies, my daughter was not buying any of it. Not far from the university, I later brought Denise and her companions to a Thai restaurant named the Elephant Walk. Like her sister, Denise had selected her friends deliberately, and dinner was a nice gathering. One of her friends stated, "Mr. Baker, Denise told us about what you're going through on our way back to campus. Last night, she was rather agitated. We helped her. Perhaps you could come back here and we will treat you to the cafeteria." That made the group giggle. I mean, really, maybe we can find a better place than that. This set off more chuckles, and we laughed all the way back to her dorm. After finding a place to rest for the evening, I had breakfast with my daughter in the morning, and on the 7th day of my trip I kept on going northward. I left Boston and arrived barely 2 hours south of Portland. My priorities now were my girls rather than my soon-to-be ex-wife. I couldn't be prouder of them. They were becoming strong, moral young women. I came to see they would negotiate the approaching divorce more skillfully than I had imagined. Leaving these two incredible jewels behind with no idea of when I will see them again presented a struggle on this day. As it happens, my concerns were unfounded. Not ready to face the realities of beginning my new life just yet, so when I arrived at Portsmouth, New Hampshire, I turned west and headed for the Presidential Range in the White Mountains. I arrived in the White Mountains and ascended Mount Washington via the Cog Railway. Feeling the chilly Arctic winds that seemed out of place in the early days of August, I finally sensed a rebirth inside myself as I stood there gazing across the breadth to the lesser peaks of the White Mountains and surveyed the lush pine trees below. Though alone, at least I was tall. I had changed, shedding the obligations and regrets of my previous existence. I was then ready to welcome the fresh chapter and all its possibilities. Standing on higher ground, I was ready to start a different trip. Everything I could have wanted was ahead. I placed a real maple syrup-topped pancake order the next morning. Right now I was in maple syrup country. Years to come would find me in the same surroundings. Restless and ready, I got back into my car and headed for Portland. Arriving in the middle of the afternoon, I chose to follow up with my new manager to let them know I'd arrived. About half of the office personnel knew me already, so I was greeted warmly. It was comforting. Those were the first happy, straightforward faces I had seen in a week. Henry, my new manager, got the staff assembled for introductions. I took a brief tour of the company, but not before everyone decided where we would all eat dinner. I thought it would be a downtown restaurant, but to my astonishment we found ourselves grilling steaks in Henry's place with all the accompaniments. Though I should have savored lobster in Maine, there was no hurry for it. This was more about getting back into society and savoring some really delicious steaks and quite exceptional local beer. They asked about my story. What was a guy from the South doing uprooting his life and moving to Maine at this point? I thereafter told my story. I left off the graphic elements but gave enough for them to grasp. I might get a bit short-tempered in the next few weeks, I said at closing. Though I have a lot to process, it is not my usual attitude. If I act out, perhaps you would call me out and advise me to chill off. Now and then I could use some mild pushback. Every man put his arm around my shoulder. Every woman present unexpectedly gave me a peck on the cheek. All they said, "AB," was, "We're here for you." All they needed to say. Later that evening, I turned on my cell phone once more after getting inside my hotel room. One of each of my daughters had sent encouraging notes. I had gotten perhaps 8 or 10 extra texts from the young men and women who loved the dinner and wanted me to know they would be there for my girls, so they must have shared my number with their friends. Those young people are really amazing. Many friends kept reaching out, so I decided to get in touch with all of them and explain the circumstances so they can stop worrying. I kept my whereabouts secret. That would come later. I just explained why I had left. Though at first they were reluctant to believe it, I sent them the same 3 pictures I had sent Karen and told them I had even more damning evidence should they require more proof. I considered it, but really I couldn't think of one way to keep her from making her own decisions. Let the truth out in due course. I had tried and it had not worked. Every one of them sent me loving notes and encouragement. I told them I would keep in touch. My ideas of becoming a ghost were clearly wishful thinking. Too many people cared about me, and that is undoubtedly a good thing. I listened to the missed calls while reading over Karen's last text messages. She came clean eventually and admitted, although her confession was laced with odd outbursts of wrath. She found me one way or another responsible for her behavior and for all that had happened. That is simply ludicrous. I texted her saying I would call her about noon the next day. It has to happen sooner or later. Let's say the talk was not at all fulfilling. She moved from denial to remorse to blame. She apologized. Over her, Frank had great influence. Her suffocating me was a result. I worked too much, hence I was at fault. She even dared to assert that between them, they were merely playing about. Nothing major happened. When she tried to persuade me she was merely looking for her creative inspiration, I almost started laughing. She even accused me of turning our girls against her, as if her own behavior hadn't achieved that without my help. When she finally stopped talking, I laid it out for her quite simply. She had plotted with Frank to turn on me, fought my attempts to mend our relationship, carried out the betrayal, and now she was dealing with fallout. The whys lost importance to me now. She was still begging her case and sobbing when I hung up. I was finished with her. Not turning back, I knew too much. Conveniently near the office, I found a basic but pleasant 2-bedroom apartment in an older building. Originally considering it as a temporary situation, I believed I could utilize the walking exercise, but soon changed my viewpoint. Living simply in town, avoiding the added chores that come with owning a house, and having a little coastal cottage for weekends sounded like a wonderful idea. Then I considered why I should stop at a cottage. My seaside escape may be a yacht I purchase, kept parked in the harbor. Early October arrived by the time I worked through all of this. Though I had intended to live alone, it has not turned out that way. Actually, I spend more time with my daughters right now than I did in Raleigh. Every month they arrange a weekend trip, usually accompanied by friends. My apartment is alive during those 36 hours, and I generally treat them to dinner. Though I miss them right away, I do yearn for the silence once they are gone. A handful of my friends have visited, and the others intend to visit when the weather is better. Surprisingly, though I live alone, I am not lonely. Along with all my travels, I have acquired new pals at work. The sailing community is vibrant and welcoming. I have met interesting women. I will, however, keep polite and well-mannered until the divorce is official. Karen still gets in touch with me even if the divorce will be formal soon. She would rather minimize the circumstances and never really stones. She says simply, "Everyone does it. It has no significance at all." It does though. The intimacy has weight, hence the dishonesty and manipulation are much more important. Though people evolve and I no longer see the use in conveying this to her. To be honest, my life is not quite apart from hers. Complete dissociation is not likely given 2 daughters and numerous mutual connections. Still, I no longer live with the everyday suffering of rejection and betrayal 600 miles separating us. Up until I was no longer living in hers, she was the focal point of my life. I am now building my own future and walking my own road. A number of favorable results came from the circumstance. To start with, I actually adore living up here. Though it's a bit of a shock, I'm experiencing my first Maine winter. If others can do it, so can I. Early darkness in this area actually makes indoor events seem cozier and more brilliant. I'm excited about spring when I can work on splicing lines and applying varnish because I started looking for a boat and came upon a spot with moorings not too far from town. The people are real, the microbreweries are excellent, and the neighborhood restaurants are decent. There is a range of music, dances to learn, like contra dancing, and I am still finding surprises. After all, I think life will go out for me. Is my heart at last healed? Not yet, but I have hope for the better life that is ahead since time has a way of curing hurts. Oh, and as a side note, Frank's wife appears to be as traditional as I am. She divorced him and kicked him out the house. Even worse is what is involved here. Frank and Karen are still unpublished. My girlfriend of 10 years left me after getting pregnant with my younger brother. Now, 6 years later, a terrible event has unfolded. For the past 6 years, I, 32M, have been living apart from my family following a terrible tragedy that split our family. I will try to precisely convey the complete scenario. 6 years ago, I was with Rebecca, my high school sweetheart, also 32. Since we were 16, we had been together. At 26, we were getting married. Everything appeared ideal, and beginning our life together excited me. Rebecca first crossed my path in our high school biology class when we were both 16. As lab colleagues, her brilliance and sense of humor immediately appealed to me. I saved weeks' worth of money for our first date to drive her to a decent local restaurant. I knocked over my water glass in great anxiety, but Rebecca laughed and helped me to clean it. I knew then she was unique. I sought to make every moment with Rebecca unforgettable during high school. I shocked her with a scavenger hunt across town for her 17th birthday, placing hints at all our favorite sites. Her last hint brought her to our neighborhood park, where I had laid together a picnic with her favorite dishes. I will never forget how brilliantly her eyes lighted when she saw it. I was resolved to make our long-distance relationship work when we started different colleges. Whether or not I had homework, every weekend I would drive 3 hours to see her. During test weeks, I would deliver her care packages loaded with her preferred treats, stress-relieving tools, and handwritten letters of encouragement. I worked additional shifts at my job after graduation, when we both returned to our hometown, to save for a dream trip for us. Rebecca had always wanted to travel 2 weeks to Europe, so I surprised her with that. We saw London, Paris, and Rome. I booked a private boat trip on the Seine River during the Paris sunset. With the Eiffel Tower gleaming behind her, I can still see her looking so gorgeous. I totally backed Rebecca when she said she wanted to return to school for her master's degree. I started a second job to cover living expenses in her education. Though I had to get up early for work the next day, I would remain late with her, testing her for exams and correcting her papers. I meant to recreate our first date for our 10th anniversary. I set aside the same table at the same restaurant, dressed similarly, and even planned with the waiter to unintentionally drop my water. Saying it was perfect, Rebecca laughed so hard. I proposed under the stars and took her to the beach following dinner so we could kiss first. Looking back now, considering all these memories hurts. Driven by my heart and soul, I really felt we were creating a life together. Knowing how much I loved her and how quickly she seemed to toss all aside makes the treachery burn much more. Rebecca came to me with startling news a few days before our wedding. She reported she was pregnant, but the baby wasn't mine. She had long been cheating on me with William, my younger brother. She was sure the baby was his. She had done the arithmetic. Though I was devastated and angry, what hurt even more was Rebecca telling me she had emotions for William and wanted to wed him instead of me. My entire life seemed to be collapsing all around me. Angry and hurt, I went to tell my parents everything. Though I anticipated them to be as startled and disturbed as I was, to my surprise they appeared strangely cool about the whole matter. William was always considered by my parents as their golden kid, hence I never expected this degree of treachery. I should be glad for my brother, they advised. Even more thrilled about being a grandma, my mother totally ignored how I would feel about the circumstances. What I was hearing stunned me. It felt as though in a moment my whole family had turned against me. The individuals meant to be supporting and loving me were advising me to simply accept this great betrayal and pretend as though everything was normal. Unable to handle the treachery from not just Rebecca and William but also my parents, I had to make the tough choice to leave. I packed, relocated to another city, and cut off all communication with each of them. 6 years ago is when that was. My father phoned me a few times throughout all that year, but those exchanges were always tense and awkward. William, my mother, and Rebecca never contacted me at all. Not even knowing the name of William's child, my own nephew. As best I could, I tried to move forward with my life. Though I struggled to trust after what occurred with Rebecca, I concentrated on my profession, established new acquaintances, and even began dating once more. Still, I was gradually reconstructing my life away from the suffering and betrayal of my past. Then a few days ago, out of the blue, my mother called me urgently. Her name on my phone screen astonished me given all this time. She seemed angry when I responded and said William had suffered a horrible accident. Now he was paralyzed and helpless of working or looking after his family. Hearing this news set me in a range of feelings. Hearing about William's accident surprised and depressed me. Even with all that happened, he remained my brother. But another side of me felt enraged that this was the reason my mother was suddenly getting in touch after 6 years of no contact. Her words next infuriated me even more. She informed me the family needed me. She specifically wanted me to return and act as William's child's father figure, supporting Rebecca in running the family while William healed. I got enraged. How could she possibly believe this was a reasonable request after all that had happened? I told her quite definitely not. She and my father had decided to back Rebecca and William over me, and I reminded her that they had betrayed me in the worst sense imaginable. I claimed I had no obligation to assist them now, particularly after years of no communication. My mother became agitated and charged me with being self-serving. She advised family always comes first and I had to let the past go, saying William's child required a father figure and that Rebecca was having trouble juggling everything on her own. She tried to guilt me. I stayed grounded and turned down once again. 6 years ago, William and Rebecca made their decision. Today they had to live with the results. I said it was not my duty to intervene and pretend to be content families just because their circumstances had become challenging. I advised my mother not to get in touch with me again unless it was to apologize for how they had treated me 6 years ago before we hung up. If they admitted how deeply they had wounded me, I indicated I might be ready to re-establish a relationship with them. But I would never replace William as a father figure for his child. I had a range of feelings once the call finished. Though a bigger part of me felt furious and damaged once more, part of me felt guilty for turning my back on my family when they needed aid. Now wrenched open, the wound that had begun to heal sent all the suffering and treachery roaring back. Since the call, I have been debating this choice constantly. One hand, I feel awful for the child growing up without a completely present father. William's accident is not his child's fault. On the other hand, since they betrayed me and then neglected me for years, I don't think it fair for my family to expect me to fly in and mend everything. Some of my pals believe I'm right in my choice. They claim my family made their bed and now they have to lie in it. Others, however, believe I'm being too severe and should at least give helping some thought for the child's sake. About what to do, I'm split. Some of me wants to keep the life I have created free from the drama and suffering of my past. Another side questions whether I'm being too stubborn and if there is any way I could assist without entirely compromising my own welfare. Reddit, is I right in not helping my brother and his family after he snatched my fiancée and got her pregnant? Edit. Whoa, thanks all for your comments and viewpoints. I want to offer some extra background and touch on a few shared themes. Regarding those curious about my dating life, yes, I have dated Rebecca, but I have not had any committed long-term partnerships. My capacity to trust suffered most from the betrayal. I have been working on it in therapy. Many have wanted to know whether I am certain the child is William's. To be honest, I'm not sure precisely. Rebecca claimed at the time she was certain based on the timing, but I never found any evidence either way. She decided to leave me for William, hence personally the paternity doesn't alter much. I'm thinking about folks who believe I ought at least see William in the hospital. Though I'm not ready to pardon him, I would like additional information about his situation and outlook. A few remarks noted the possibilities of financial assistance apart from direct engagement. I hadn't given this any thought before, but it could be interesting. For those intrigued about my father's calls over the years, they were essentially surface-level exchanges. The relationship stayed tense since he never admitted the damage done or apologized. A few inquired about other family members. Though they reside in separate states and weren't closely involved in the matter, I have a few relatives I still contact. Though most people feel I owe them nothing, assisting might offer me peace. I will give this viewpoint considerable thought. I value it. I appreciate it all once more. Reading your remarks has helped me to consider the complicated and emotionally charged circumstances that exist here. I'll let you know should any noteworthy changes occur. Update. My last post was a couple weeks ago, and a lot has happened. I wanted to let you know how things stand. My parents persisted even if my first response to aid was negative. Almost every day my mother phoned. Even my father started getting in touch more regularly, telling me how much William and his family needed my support. They kept urging me to change my mind. I first disregarded most of their calls and texts, but after weeks of non-stop correspondence, I became tired. Though I was still enraged over all that had transpired, a tiny bit of me was fascinated about William's situation. At last, following almost 3 weeks of this, I made the decision to pay William a visit in the hospital. I reminded myself that was only to find out how severe his illness truly was, not because I was thinking of volunteering. My tummy knotted when I got to the hospital. After not seeing any of my family members personally for 6 years, I wasn't sure how I would respond. William was laying in the hospital bed as I arrived into his room. He appeared pallid and skinny, linked to several devices. To find my once active younger brother in this situation shocked me. My parents as well. With more gray hair and wrinkles, they seemed older than I had recalled. They hurried over to hug me when they found me, but I pulled back. Not yet was I ready for that degree of closeness. Then I turned to see Rebecca. Tired and concerned, she was standing beside William's bed. Our eyes locked and I started to flood in recollections. I thought back to all the times I had totally trusted her, all the future we had arranged together. I considered how she had been my confidant, best friend, the one I imagined I would spend my life with. Then I thought of how readily she had thrown all of it away. How she had betrayed me in the worst imaginable manner with my own brother. Seeing Rebecca once more after all these years caused all the suffering and resentment I had tried so hard to overcome. I had to fight the want to turn back and leave the hospital straight out. I avoided talking with Rebecca. Rather, I probed my father about William's situation. William had sustained a spinal cord injury in an automobile accident, he said. From the waist down, he was paralyzed and would require long-term rehabilitation. The doctors doubted if he would ever walk once more. My dad remarked something that surprised me as we were chatting. Soon after the child was born, he said, they conducted a paternity test to verify William's indeed fatherhood. I had no knowledge of this test, thus it seemed as a last validation of their treachery. A small child of around 5 or 6 entered the room during our conversation. This has to be my nephew William and Rebecca's son, I realized. The lad seemed perplexed and perhaps afraid of all the medical machinery. Rebecca first brought him to me as his uncle. Mostly just saying hello and asking him about his favorite toys and games, I spent a few minutes with the youngster. Meeting this child who was biologically my nephew but whom I had never known existed felt odd. My mother demanded that I visit their place to further discuss until lately following the hospital visit. I grudgingly agreed, partly to get this whole matter over with. My mother started a sermon at the house on family responsibility and how I should have been stepping forward to assist Rebecca and the child while William was healing. She expressed Rebecca's overwhelm in having to raise a kid, take care of William, and run their house alone. Listening to her, my resentment started to grow. When she stopped at last, I told her precisely how I felt. Like she usually had, she was acting selfishly and solely thinking about William. She had not once asked how I was doing or shown any interest in my life over the past 6 years. I pointed out in all her calls and during this entire chat. She seemed to have come out to me solely because she needed something from me, not because she really cared about mending our friendship. Even after William had deceived her so terribly, I stated it stung that she appeared more worried about his welfare than she ever had about mine. Saying that of course she loved me, my mother tried to defend herself, pointing out that William's position was an emergency. She stated, I had a duty to help, as the healthy brother. I inhaled deeply and told her my ultimate choice. I responded that although I could not give up my own life and peace of mind to assist William's family, I felt pity for his situation and for the difficulties they were confronting. I said I wasn't ready to give up all of the years I had been constructing a new life for myself, working over the trauma and betrayal they had given me. I told her I might be ready to see them once more in the future, but only if they were ready to own how much they had offended me and begin to re-establish trust. I made it plain that this connection would not call for my filling in for William or serving as a father figure for his son. My choices infuriated my parents. They said I was forsaking my family when they most needed me, that I was selfish, but I insisted. 6 years ago they supported William and Rebecca above me, therefore making their choices. Now they had to deal with the results of that choice. I informed them before I went that, while I was open to remaining in touch and maybe working on our connection over time, only if they could respect my limits and show real interest in my life, not simply what I could do for them. That evening's drive home brought a range of feelings. Particularly considering William's sons growing up with a crippled father, part of me felt bad for not assisting more. Still, more of me felt relieved. At last I had spoken up for myself and established reasonable limits with my family. I came to see that although family relations are vital, they do not grant anyone permission to mistreat you or exploit you. Years of mending from their treachery had gone, and I wouldn't be ready to relive those scars just because they suddenly felt they needed me. My parents have phoned a few times in the weeks following that trip. Though the talks have been strained, they seem to be trying to probe my life rather than merely discuss William. Though it's a little step, it offers me hope that perhaps our connection will develop in a better shape with time. Right now, I'm mostly concerned with my own life and welfare. Reconnecting with my family has brought up emotions that I have begun seeing a therapist again to work through. I'm also putting myself into my work and hanging out with buddies who have helped me through all of this. Though I'm not sure what the future holds for my family, I am sure I made the best choice for me. Though only on my terms and at a speed I'm comfortable with, I am open to gently restoring our relationship. I appreciate all of your help and guidance during these trying circumstances. Though I feel like I at last found some closure, it has been a difficult few weeks. I am ready to go forward with my life. My mom abandoned me, and my cruel stepdad kicked me out. Years later, they're back begging for help, and I told them this. For the past 5 years, I, an 18-year-old man, have lived with my mother and stepdad. My life changed dramatically when at 10, my biological dad died in a vehicle accident. For my mom as much as for me, it was a trying period. For a few years, we battled both financially and emotionally until my mom met Mark when I was 12. They spent a year dating before getting married when I was 13. Mark clearly didn't like me right from the start. He always saw me as a burden and a continual reminder of my mother's previous relationship. That day they were wedded to me. I noticed Mark staring coldly, calculatedly while everyone was celebrating. Though I dismissed it as simply wedding day nerves, it made me shudder. Growing up, I made every effort to fit in with Mark. Along with maintaining my grades and helping him with yard work or watching football, activities he liked, I worked around the house. Still, it never was sufficient whatever I did. He would always find means to denigrate me or make me unwelcome. Mark would criticize me for not being his actual son or for simply squandering room in his house. If it were up to me, you would be out on the street where you belong, he would say, or, you're lucky your mother loves you because no one else would put up with a useless kid like you. Though they hurt, I tried not to let them define me. When she saw these exchanges, my mother would try to referee, but she usually sided with Mark to diffuse conflict. She might remark, he doesn't mean it that way, or you need to try harder to get along with Mark. In my own house, I felt as though I was continually treading on eggshells. As I aged, things grew worse. Mark insisted on my paying rent when I reached 16 and started working part-time at a nearby grocery store. Though she felt it was a little harsh, my mother agreed it would teach me responsibility. So a good amount of my little pay went to Mark every month, leaving me nothing to save or spend on myself. My mother recently landed an incredible job overseas. She could possibly acquire a permanent job from a 6-month contract she was presented with in Europe. I could see the thrill in her eyes when she initially told me about it. I had not seen her genuinely delighted about something in years, but worries about living alone with Mark soon eclipsed my delight for her. I told my mother about how Mark treated me when she was away, therefore expressing my worries. I related stories of events when he would accidentally ruin items I cared about, such as the model airplane my dad and I created together before he passed away, or how he would forget to buy groceries I could eat knowing I had dietary restrictions. My mother dismissed it, saying Mark was merely tough and I was exaggerating. She advised me to give him an opportunity and that living together might strengthen our relationship. That day my mother left was among the toughest of my life. I hugged her tightly while we stood at the airport, stifling tears. Though I wanted her to stay, to not be left with Mark alone, I couldn't bring myself to slow her down. Mark laid his hand on my shoulder as she passed the security checkpoint. Though his hold was agonizing, to anyone observing it would have looked like a consoling action. His voice chilly, he continued, "Let's go home, boy. Things are going to be different now." And they were different as well. Things plummeted from the time we arrived home. Mark started screaming at me for the most minor transgressions. Should I leave a dish in the sink or arrive home 5 minutes later than usual, he would yell. Once on my way to school, I unintentionally left a light on in my room. Mark had taken out every light bulb from my room when I returned. "You don't deserve to have any if you can't remember to turn off the lights," he remarked, grinning. Saying he was merely letting me stay because of my mother, he threatened to kick me out several times. "One incorrect move," he would counsel, "and you'll be out on the street. And who do you suppose your mother will find credible? Me, her devoted husband, or her unappreciative kid brat?" Though I tried to keep my head down and avoid confrontation, it was getting intolerable. My mental health was failing and I couldn't concentrate on my academics. I was depressed and concerned all the time as my grades began to slide. Several times I called my mother to let her know what was occurring, but she always appeared preoccupied and advised me to sort it out with Mark. Her voice sounded stressed about her new employment, and I didn't want to aggravate her problems. About 2 months into my mother's absence, one evening things got out of control. Covering a sick colleague, I had been working late at my job. When I got home late, I contacted Mark to let him know. But when I got there he was waiting for me, enraged. He accused me of lying, of doing drugs or running afoul of the law. He labeled me useless and declared he was bored with having me around when I tried to explain. Driven by a flash of wrath, he seized a box containing old pictures, my dad's watch, and school keepsakes and threatened to toss them. I begged him to stop, and in the struggle the box dropped and its contents spilled over the floor. Mark topped me as I hurried to gather my things. "This ends now," he snarled. "I will throw you out myself. I want you out of my house by tomorrow." That was the final straw. I knew I couldn't stand it anymore. I packed a bag with basics and departed in the middle of the night once Mark turned in for sleep. After a few days of crashing at my best friend's house, I discovered a small room to rent using part-time job savings. I didn't notify my mother right away since I wanted to spare her from stress and compromise her employment possibility. When she returned, I reasoned I would explain everything. Mark began sending me frightening notes that he would phone the police and report me as a runaway should I not return, so I blocked his number. 1 month now, and I'm getting by on my own. It's not easy. I'm trying to keep up with school while working extra hours to pay for basic needs including rent. Though I hardly eat some days, it's still better than living under Mark's roof. Though I feel bad about leaving without telling my mother, I also feel as though I had little option. Stress and continual fear were breaking me. So Reddit, am I the moron for leaving the house of my stepfather while my mother was overseas? Should I have pushed more to make things work? Should I get in touch with my mother right now and clarify everything? I'm lost and would much benefit from any guidance. Edit. I appreciate your replies, everybody. Having perused them, I value your help. Many of you have inquired about my housing circumstances and future intentions. I came into a modest studio apartment through a buddy of a friend right now. Though I can hear every movement my neighbors make and the plumbing is erratic, it's safe and reasonably priced. To pay for things, I'm part-time instructing online and working at a nearby diner. Regarding education, I am in my senior year and set to graduate. My school counselor has been in contact with me on my circumstances and has been quite helpful in ensuring I remain on target. Others of you advised getting in touch with other relatives. Sadly, my grandma died a few years ago and my mom was an only kid. After his death, my dad's side of the family lost contact with us. Hence, for the past few years, Mark, my mother and I basically have been the only ones in touch. When my mother gets back, I'm not sure how to handle things. Though another part of me wants to tell her everything, I am afraid she won't believe me or will start to side with Mark once more. When I visit the bridge, I suppose I'll cross it. Right now my priorities are finishing school and keeping afloat. Again, thank you everyone for your wise counsel and polite comments. Update 1. After my first post 6 months ago, a lot has happened. I wanted to let everyone know about current affairs. Last week, my mother got back from a work trip overseas. Though I was anxious about meeting her, I also looked forward to at last clarifying all that had happened with Mark. Still, events did not go as I had intended. The day she returned, I got her on the line. Her voice was icy and hostile, not at all the gentle, caring tone I was accustomed to. She insisted on knowing whether it was accurate that I had fled with money taken from Mark. Startled and perplexed, my mind flew to try to figure out where this charge originated. I tried to describe what actually happened. How Mark had been verbally nasty. How he had threatened to kick me out, and how I left for my own safety and mental health. I informed her about the episode involving my box of personal items and about how Mark had made every day she was gone awful. Still, my mother would not pay attention. She insisted non-stop that Mark had shown her proof of my theft. She was evasive when I asked what proof, mentioning missing money and dubious bank activity. I assured her I had never taken anything in my life. It was all falsehoods. She appeared to have her opinion already formed, even though I reminded her of how honest I had always been with her and how hard I had worked at my part-time job to help the house. To enable us to have a face-to-face conversation, I pleaded with her to meet personally. She accepted under some coaxing, but Mark was with her when we met at a neighborhood cafe. My heart dropped the minute I saw him. Though he looked sad, I could see the triumphant gleam in his eyes. Mark presented me with a show of worry and disappointment. He concocted a story about how he had tried his best to look after me while my mom was away, but that I had grown rebellious and begun pilfering money to pay for a party life. He discussed how he had spotted strange withdrawals from their joint account and how he would have noticed cash missing from his wallet. I stumbled. Though he told it so convincingly, every word he spoke was a lie. He even claimed to have fictitious bank records and invoices proving I had been taking money. Though I'm not sure how he made them, they appeared real enough to mislead my mother. He discussed his attempts to approach me about it, but I had fled instead of dealing with the fallout. I tried furiously to explain my side of the narrative and defend myself. I described how I'd been struggling to make ends meet in my tiny apartment and how I'd been working extra shifts to help myself. I mentioned to them the evenings I would have gone to bed hungry as I cannot afford rent as well as food. I begged my mother to remember how I had always been conscientious with money, how I had never given her any cause to question me before. But Mark had obviously been working on my mother for several weeks prior to her comeback. Her belief of me as a troubled, unappreciative child who had seized advantage of her absence was shaped by his poisoning of her against me. He presented himself as the victim, a worried stepfather limited to helping his wayward stepson. Seeing the sight of disappointment and wrath in my mother's eyes was the worst of it. She said she had trusted me to behave while she was away and she couldn't believe I would treat her this way. She accused me of trying to assign blame and fabricating falsehoods about my loving stepfather when I tried to explain about Mark's behavior. Her voice breaking, "How could you do this to us?" she asked. "We gave you everything. This is how you reimburse us?" Her comments ripped right through, each one like a physical blow. Her own son Mark seemed to me incomprehensible as she believed him over me. My mother informed me at the meeting that she wanted time to consider what to do going forward. If she didn't trust me, she stated she cannot have me back in the house. I watched Mark comfort my mother by putting his arm around her shoulders as they exited the eatery. I got queasy looking at it. I kept trying to get in touch with my mother throughout the next few days, hoping she would listen to me free from Mark's influence. She either answered with brief, icy texts instructing me to quit lying and take accountability for my behavior or ignored my calls. I was quite hungry, hoping they may be able to talk some sense into her. I contacted a few of Mom's friends. Alas, it appeared Mark had also gotten to them. They all told me how let down they felt of me, how they couldn't believe I would have stolen from my own household. My mother finally sent me a lengthy text message stating she had decided it would be better if I stayed away from home. She claimed she needed time to get through everything and that she felt rather let down in me. She advised me not to get in touch for a little while. I felt crushed. Along with losing my house, I had lost my mother, the one I considered to be always on my side. Mark had turned her against her own son by totally controlling her. The next several weeks blurted together. Trying to forget the huge void in my life where my family used to be, I pushed myself into work and education. Often lying awake at night, I struggled to fall asleep and found myself wondering what I could have said better to make my mother believe me. I replayed the talks in my mind. My grades began to slide once more, and I ran the danger of not graduating. It took a worried teacher dragging me aside to get me out of my slide bag. She questioned what was wrong when she observed my alterations. Hesitantly at first, I told her all. She thought of me surprisingly. She assisted me in contacting a social professional and a school counselor capable of offering me tools and assistance. Their assistance allowed me to get back on track with my academics and even obtain some extra financial aid to cover living expenses. I'm now figuring out my next moves. Working as hard as I can to support myself, I am still in my little flat. I have contacted a few reliable teachers at the institution who have been encouraging and guiding me through independent finishing of high school. About the future, I'm terrified, angry, and wounded. My mother's treachery aches especially, and there are days when the loneliness feels unbearable. But I also want to prove Mark mistaken and show my mother the truth at last. Though I have not given up hope totally, I am not sure if our connection will ever be the same. Right now, I'm mostly planning for college and finishing off high school. Though it won't be simple, I am resolved to lead a better life for myself whether or not my family supports it. I appreciate your support of my original post everywhere. I would really appreciate any guidance on how one might go from here. How might I recover from this betrayal? When I feel so alone, how can I design a life for myself? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 2, 5 years later. My last update 5 years ago, and my life has altered drastically. I wanted to let others know what had happened and obtain some viewpoint on a most recent development. After high school, I threw myself into my education and job. Though I still felt the loss of my family hard, I turned that suffering into will. Majoring in computer science, I secured a scholarship at a state institution. I balanced several part-time jobs to make ends meet. Freelancing web design, working at the university library, and even weekend pizza delivery. Though it was demanding, college also released me. Living with Mark, I felt free from the continual anxiety and terror that had dogged me for the first time in years. To help me through the pain of my past, I began visiting a therapist and befriended people who grew to be like family. After graduating with honors, I found work directly out of college at a bright tech startup. Though I worked long hours and under great pressure, the work was challenging and I loved that challenge. Being appreciated for my work ethic and abilities felt fantastic, something I hadn't lately experienced. I have ascended in the company during the last 3 years. Originally a junior developer, the higher-ups were drawn to my commitment and creative ideas. Within a year, I was elevated to team lead. Lately, I was assigned lead developer for our primary offering. Our startup recently attracted a sizable investment, which sent us into the major tech industry ranks. Along with stock options that might be quite valuable should the business keep expanding, this brought a sizable pay rise for me. For the first time in my life, I am comfortable as well as financially steady. Along with moving into a decent apartment and even beginning to save money for the future, I bought my first car. I never spoke with Mark or my mother during this period. Particularly during holidays and events like my college graduation and career promotions, it was difficult. There were evenings when I would lie awake wondering whether my mother ever considered me, whether she ever regretted choosing Mark above me. But I concentrated on starting a new life for me and assembling a selected family including mentors and close friends. Out of the blue last week, I got a call from an unidentified number. My response caused a hush, then I heard a voice I hadn't heard 5 years ago. Mom was it. Her voice sounded worn out and desperate, nothing like the confident, loving mother I knew from my early years. She informed me Mark and she were having money problems. Mark apparently had some poor investments, and their property was about to go under foreclosure. Mark has been unemployed for the past year since his company he worked for filed for bankruptcy. They were drowning in debt after devouring their savings. My mother said she was sorry for all that had transpired years ago. Her voice broke as she said she had come to see Mark had controlled her over time. She admitted she had been carrying guilt for years and she regretted not trusting me. She asked whether we might get together to try to heal our relationship and to go over things. I froze. I had dreamed of this for years, my mother recognizing the truth and reaching out to re-establish contact. Now that it was occurring though, I experienced a rush of emotions, optimism, resentment, grief, and residual betrayal. After a protracted silence, I decided to see her at a cafe, the same one where we had our confrontation 5 years earlier. It startled me to find Mark and my mother there when I got there. With her grayed hair and worried-lined face, my mother seemed older and exhausted. Mark's shoulders dropped and his eyes downcast suggested he had lost the cocky air he formerly possessed. More specifically, they said they were months behind on their mortgage payments and that the bank threatened to seize their residence. When his company closed, Mark lost his career. Even now, he has struggled to find consistent employment. Teacher pay for my mother was insufficient to pay living expenses and debt. I observed as they spoke the dynamic between them had altered. often breaking off or correcting Mark. My mother looked more forceful. Mark, on the other hand, seemed subdued, a far cry from the dominant man I recalled. The true reason they reached out was to ask whether I might provide them loans to enable them to get back on their feet. Having heard through mutual friends about my achievements in the tech sector, they thought I would be in a position to be of use. Sitting there, I listened to their appeal and experienced a range of feelings. Part of me felt vindicated. Years ago, Mark had lied and exploited the circumstances, and at last they were owning this. Another side of me, though, was resentment at their only outreach when they required something from me. Mom grabbed my hand in hers across the table, tears in her eyes. "I know we don't deserve your help," she added. "We are desperate even though what we did to you was awful. We have nowhere else to turn." Mark joined in, his voice missing the assurance it had previously possessed. "I know you have every cause to hate me," he continued. "I treated you cruelly. I let everything be poisoned by my insecurity and jealousy. Though I am really sorry for what I did, I am not asking for pardon." Their apologies set off past hurts and memories. I considered the lonely evenings in my small apartment, battling poverty. I recalled the sense of betrayal when my own mother decided to accept a falsehood instead of her son's reality. I told them I needed time to consider it once they had finished speaking and inhaled deeply. I promised nothing when I left the cafe. Their begging gaze trailed after me. I'm divided now. One hand, I have worked hard for my accomplishment, and I do not believe I owe them anything based on their treatment of me. Mark's falsehoods ruined my bond with my mother and drove me to fend for myself when young. Part of me wants to turn away and let them deal with the results of their behavior. Still, even with everything, I worry about my mother. Though I worry that if I assist her, I would be exposing myself to more manipulation or demands of continuous support. The idea of her being homeless or struggling hurts my heart. The way this could affect my own financial stability worries me as well. I'm not sure whether I could afford to save them without sacrificing my own future, even if right now I'm doing great. The startup scene is erratic, hence my present success is not sure to last. One more issue is forgiveness. Can I really get beyond what transpired? After such a great betrayal, is it possible to repair a relationship with my mother? And then regarding Mark, can I ever trust him or have him back in my life even as he apologies? Unable to decide, I have been debating these questions for the past week. I discussed it with my closest friends and even mentioned it in a session with my therapist. Though everyone has different ideas, finally they all say the same: it is my decision to make. Part of me is driven to be a great person and offer an olive branch of support. Perhaps this is the first step toward mending past hurts and reconstructing my relationship with my mother. Another side of me, meanwhile, is terrified of subjecting myself to the suffering I have so battled once more. So on Reddit, I find myself wondering once more: am I bad if I refuse to assist my mother and stepdad financially following all that has happened? Should I provide them another chance or guard the life I have created or myself? I could really appreciate some outside view because I find myself at a crossroads. Wife had an affair with my stepfather to steal the $1 million mansion, but little did she know it was mine. Married 7 years to Kia, 38F, I am 38M. With our share of ups and downs, our relationship has been really normal. The downs largely resulted from my wife's belief I was overly close to my mother. She did call me a mama's boy. Since my mother passed away 2 years ago, I am not going to defend it now as she is no longer living. I'm happy I could love her the way she deserved. She had raised me alone and, even beyond her means, given me the finest of everything. Until she met Andrew 10 years ago, my mother was a single parent to me. Andrew married my mother in early 50s, having recently gone through divorce. I'm not sure what Andrew's mother saw that caused her to wed him after 2 decades of single life. Andrew vanished from me when Mom was still around. Twice a week I used to see her, but my interactions with Andrew limited themselves to polite salutations and a smile. Though I never showed Mom, I simply couldn't accept him as a father figure and don't know why. She finding a friend in her last days of life made me glad. Andrew vanished from my life and there was no doubt about his existence. Though he was still living in my mom's house, I never even visited him following her funeral. When I saw him seated with my wife, his arm encircling hers, I started to worry about him. That was not an elderly or friendly hug. Their body language bothered me, or more accurately, their chemistry. Our familial dynamics made it strange as well. Like I indicated, Chia was not near my stepdad, and I was never close to him either. For me then, seeing such ease between them was somewhat awkward. I was driving while they were seated in a roadside cafe. Early that day, I had left the office to meet an old buddy. Usually I avoid visiting the region where I saw them. It is far from both my house and even my office. I went to see a friend, but I was mostly preoccupied. My friend persisted in asking whether something was bothering me, but I simply said it was related to approaching work. How could I share with him what I observed on my way? When I got home, I addressed Tia straightforwardly, telling her I saw her with Andrew without thinking. She became pale and lost speech. "Yeah, I met him for lunch," she remarked afterwards. She claimed she bumped into him when I asked her why all of a sudden, and then he offered to have lunch with her. She sensed from my staring at her that I had seen something I shouldn't have. She responded, "Your stepdad was quite offended over losing your mother." I set out to comfort him. Lonesome and without someone to chat to, the poor elderly man held my hands, hence he could communicate his loss. You see, I left out telling her. I watched him clutching her hands. He was putting his arms around her, and the way they were speaking didn't seem like he was depressed or at a loss for my mother. Though they were not laughing, their body language was flirty. Though I said nothing, I bought her excuse. Before any more confrontation, I chose to look into the problem personally. Chia works weekends and is off during weekdays since she is a nail artist in a beauty salon. Not a matter of concern between us until lately. We used to argue over Kia not allowing time for our relationship when she used to be overly consumed with her profession. She insisted that following the death of her mother, I was acting needy. She added that I used to visit my mom 2 times a week earlier, hence Chia's absence didn't really disturb me. But she was mistaken. On weekends, I used to see my mother. Although Chia had work on her off days, I always made sure I got back home promptly to spend time with her. She used to fight about me being a mama's boy, but now she was claiming I was hungry. I became even more enraged seeing her with my stepdad while all this was happening. A few weeks later, Thanksgiving arrived. Yes, I am referring to last Thanksgiving that just passed, and she demanded that we extend an invitation to Andrew. Her straight recommendation caught me off guard. Andrew was living alone and had no one, she stated, hence as extended family, we should welcome him. She answered, yeah, because they had each other to celebrate with, and now that poor old man is alone. When I told her she never invited them when my mom was alive. In the end I gave in. Really, I wanted to observe their behavior toward me. Though I now knew the truth, I wouldn't say they behaved normally. Rather, they did nothing odd. I would not have noticed anything if I did not know the truth. For much of it I was quiet. I never liked him, thus my suspicions made me even more resentful of his presence. I felt he also realized I didn't enjoy it. It was a strange supper overall. Sia tried to break the quiet with some pointless subjects, only to elicit false grins from both of us eating silently. I decided to plot since it was getting hard for me to live with a heavy heart. Though it was locked, I considered looking at her phone but decided against it. I did not to alert her and ask her for the password. I then developed still another strategy. I informed Chia I would be working out of town for many days. I left early on the intended day and headed to my office as normal, but before that I had fitted a GPS device in Chia's car and was monitoring it from a distance. She drove Andrew to his house just before lunchtime. I wanted to catch her red-handed, but I worried I would appear like an idiot if I showed up and they were just sitting and talking. I approached my pal Keith for assistance. I urged him to see Andrew and shared my misgivings. It was a safe strategy. I advised him to document any unusual findings. The house lock was password encrypted, hence I was expecting Andrew hadn't updated the PIN. I advised Keith to tell Andrew the front door was open and he was simply checking on him as he was concerned Andrew could accuse him of sneaking in. There was a little tunnel instead of the main door leading straight into the living room. Nobody would find him unlocking the door suspicious. He agreed following a persuasive argument. He entered but searched the corridor for them nowhere. Then he peeped in the bedroom while running his phone camera on. He had kept the phone in his shirt pocket with the camera sticking out to avoid suspicion. The two were embracing each other without clothes, he noted. Before one of them knew what had happened, he swiftly started to cry, sorry, and left the house. Following him outdoors, Andrew asked what he was doing there. Keith said he was only checking on him, but it's good, he would come later. Before any conflict with Andrew or Kia, he sat inside his car and headed off. But my guy is really dumb. He had the front camera open the entire time, hence nothing was captured save Andrew and Chia screaming at Keith's unexpected presence. Still, I received the required confirming evidence. Before leaving the house that day, I had already packed 2 sets of clothes and my toiletries. Therefore I headed to Keith's place. He urged me to stay with him until all this was settled since his wife was out of town at her parents' place. She is aware Keith would have shown me the truth. She messaged me wondering when I would get home. I responded not. I did ghost her, yes. Thinking I'm out of town for work, She has been bombashing my phone with countless texts and calls. 4 days ago this took place. Since I never want to see her face ever again, I have virtually contacted a lawyer. I will get her kicked from my residence and serve her divorce paperwork. Update 1. The attorney sent the divorce paperwork 10 days later. CIA wanted a talk and was simply not ready to sign them. If at all possible, my attorney advised we pursue an out-of-court settlement since it would drastically cut time and expenses. See, I work a consistent regular job as a salesperson. I only have so much leave to go to court hearings and a limited budget for lawyers. I agreed to meet in the presence of the lawyer. QEA persisted in a private talk with me though, even as I headed for the appointment. I objected, but thus long as I didn't say or promise anything she demanded, my attorney urged me to go for it. He set rigorous rules: no hugging, no touching, and no confessing. Her presence made me sick. I shoved her away as she tried to hug me. She claimed everything was a misinterpretation. Reading so many cheating stories on Reddit helped me to know exactly what all cheaters say. I answered, "Yeah, certainly. You were really attempting to assist an elderly poor man from his loneliness, right?" She said it was merely snuggling and nothing else, but she acknowledged whatever Keith saw was accurate, and she wasn't trying to dispute anything. Of course, hugging naked is quite natural. But what she said next really made sense. She claimed she acted to protect our future. Really? How exactly? She said, "Your mother bequeathed all her riches to Andrew. Should he wed someone else, that woman would be entitled to it. The property belonging to your family would go to someone else. You slept with my stepdad," I continued. "For this reason. You may become my stepmother and inherit the fortune of my mother. Does this family dynamic show any complexity?" Herbs made me lightheaded, hence I hurried out of the conference hall. My attorney asked for specifics of the conversation when I returned. I gave him all I could. Though he cracked up momentarily, he was actually curious about the inheritance my mother left. Mom had left behind a house her uncle had left behind. Way beyond my means, it was a large mansion. Fascinatingly, she always kept her eye on that mansion. She even insisted on us moving into the mansion following our marriage. Though Chia wanted her mother to move out to my apartment while we were occupying her mansion, I was glad she wanted to live with her. I denied it. She lived here. Why should she leave? You're the only son of your mother, thus that house would come to you, Kia stated. Why not immediately move in there? This caused many of our arguments. I lied to her one day, telling her mom had willed that house to Andrew. And you see the cost I paid for my lie. Kia pursued my stepdad in order to own the house. Kia also lacked knowledge of one other bit of information. I neglected to name myself as the owner of the house when Mom passed away. Andrew wanted to live there till he felt so otherwise. Transferring it to my name would be like he were residing on my land, and I'm sure he wouldn't like that. The name transfer is costly as well, so I let it be as I was short on money at the time. I'm also happy I didn't transfer it since Shia would have been entitled to half of the house following our divorce. Alternatively, if such had been the case, she might not have slept with Andrew. Not known. Still, in any context a cheater is always a cheater. Indeed, she was unaware that my mother had willed the house to me. She urged me to rethink the divorce. She claimed she could entice Andrew to offer her the house, and should I not divorce her, the mansion would be ours. Laughing at her suggestion, I answered, "No, thank you for the offer." "Luck with your mansion." "Smoking," she continued. "You're losing a lot with this divorce." Grinning, I answered, "I don't give a if *ck. I don't know whether she was truly that stupid or was trying to spare herself from the humiliation. Nevertheless, it makes no difference. Except for the savings in our joint account, which we divided, she understood I had no significant fortune. After the divorce was official, I felt rather relieved. Kia would never have split with me at any point if she had come clean about the mansion's ownership. And I cannot pass on that wretch my mom's inheritance. She had buried her own grave by revealing her motivations for dating Andrew, and I was going to use that against her to send Andrew away from her life. During our divorce, I watched Andrew picking her up from court, helping her with all legal issues. I was just waiting for the divorce to pass in order to witness her reaction and break her bubble. Having done it, I'm going to destroy Kia next. Update 2. I sent Andrew the specifics of Kia's confession once my divorce was official. "You know that your mom will give you the mansion, right?" he answered. "Yes, I have her will," I responded. "But Chia doesn't know. She's going to ask you to give her the mansion." Revealing the truth was not doing him any favors. All I wanted was to bust Kia's bubble. The underprivileged girl had been fantasizing of owning my mother's property. Andrew informed me Kia had lately been subtly questioning him about his will and who would get his legacy. but he never understood her intentions since he lacked any wealth to mention. I stopped the conversation at that since I wanted no bro code with Andrew. I finally got a call from Shia. Usually I would not have responded, but this time I did since I understood what it was about. From the other line, she was screaming, "Why did you not tell me your mother willed the house to you? King destroyed me instead. I was practically guarding your property by licking the ass of this old man." Her insults were coming from a place of hurt, hence I was merely laughing at them. I said, "Thanks so much. Good luck with your gold-digging approach." I hung up the call and blocked her then. She contacted me once more from an unidentified number a few days later, perhaps from the phone of a friend or co-worker. Andrew had split from her, she told me. He discovered she was with him only for inheritance somehow, and he dumped her since the truth surfaced. He regarded her as avaricious. Andrew turned against her even though she maintained she was helping him deal with loneliness. Her truth had already come out, so I wonder why she was still trying to pass being a devout woman. I answered cynically, "Yes, you have slept with everyone selflessly only for the sake of others. You hardly have any underlying intentions at all." She said she was dating Andrew for my benefit, to get the mansion for me. Now she said she was merely trying to support Andrew through grief and loneliness. Indeed, she possessed a really clean soul. She persisted there as well. She made every effort to reach and attack me. Sometimes begging, other times gaslighting me to get back together. She showed up to my residence, my workplace, and even some frequent public venues I visited. Unbelievably, she even tried to corner me for a talk when she visited my gym. Though I disregarded her as though she were a stranger to me, it was a hell of a nightmare. Technically, she was a stranger since our divorce was done. Update 3. Though my history returned as soon as I moved the mansion's ownership to my name, I felt this story was finished. God knows what her house obsession was about. Who wouldn't want $1 million residence to their name, really? I'm not sure, though, how long it would take her to come to terms with reality. 6 months into my divorce, I made the decision to change the name of the mansion. I hadn't done it before, as I indicated earlier, as I lacked the savings for the ownership change. I could save for the transfer in 4 to 5 months now that I was separated and my spending had dropped significantly. I told Andrew about it before I applied for the transfer. Once I learned about his affair with Kia, he was no longer residing in the house. I asked him not to leave, but he answered that he would remove his last items from the house, and he did. He assigned me house administrative duties, including locking system maintenance. The documentation did not arrive for a few months. I had the house painted in the meantime. I had those cleaned as the pool and the grass hadn't been maintained for a long time. I had no touch with Tia, and based on our most recent talk, Andrew had also broken off with her. Her showing up to the estate during one of the cleaning days confused me then. When I missed there, the housekeeping manager called to let me know a woman had descended and was prowling about the premises. She told them she was my wife when they tried to stop her from entering, so they laughed. Yes, correct. They thought she was a trespasser based on her sensations of the walls and interiors. She was, in fact. I said I had no wife and requested them to kick her out. They followed orders and then confirmed by phone that she had left the house. Not a prize for guessing if she showed up at my house. Yes, she did. Saying I had abandoned her when she did nothing wrong and that her motives were pure, she was screaming and wailing. I advised her to, instead of showing up at my place, get therapy and investigate a mental facility. I refused her demand for me to let her inside to chat. I shut the door squarely in her path. Update 4. On my mansion land, I have also placed a restraining order against Hia. She had not been violent, hence her odds of sneaking into that location or damaging it were limited, but yet I didn't trust her. I had to act in order to protect the rights of the new house occupants. I wished Hia not to cause needless disturbance for them. Until now, it has been seamless. I hope I will have to update this thread further. Shia's chapter should finish so I may continue with my life. Am I the asshole for wearing an over-the-top outfit to my friend's birthday party and overshadowing the host? Original post. Before I begin, English is not my first language, so apologies for typos, bad grammar and punctuation. I'm also on mobile and using a throwaway just in case. So last Friday night my 24M friend, we'll call him Peter, celebrated his 28th birthday. His co-worker, that is what he refers to her as, April, offered to organize and host the party. The dress code was, as she put it, your gothic best. Peter loves anything morbid and macabre, so it would fit his taste perfectly. Now I prioritize comfort over looks, which leaves me dressing mostly in scrubs at work or sweats, and hoodies when I'm out and about. Hence April decided to remind me multiple times in an increasingly condescending tone to follow the dress code. So I did just that. I wore a black velvet trouser and waistcoat set with a white 18th century men's shirt, a pirate shirt if you will. All of these items I made completely myself. From drafting the patterns to sewing the shirt completely by hand and adding an embroidery moth across the back of the waistcoat. Now, to the party itself. I ended up arriving later than most people due to being held up at work longer than expected. I warned both Peter and April about it. Peter said it was no problem at all, but I better show up, and April left me on red. So I arrived 40 minutes late, greeted April, congratulated Peter and gave him his gift. Mocktails were drunk and pleasantries were exchanged. Over the course of the night I got a lot of compliments on my outfit, and my craft skills were a topic of conversation several times over the evening. It also didn't really help that when someone asked me where I got the suit or shirt from, Peter would loudly tell them all about how I made everything myself. I remember being spun around a couple of times so people could look/touch the embroidery in the back. Everyone had a good time, or so I thought. Over the weekend, April and her friends ended up bombarding my phone and any social media that they could find with absolutely nasty messages. How I was an attention seeker, how desperate I came across, how I absolutely ruined the party April had been planning for weeks, how dare I steal attention away and overshadow Peter and April. You get the idea. I feel like I'm going a bit insane. Overshadowing anybody was never my intention, especially my friend at his own party, and I don't think that I did. But all of these comments are making me rethink my choices. So am I the asshole here? I really need some outside perspective. Relevant comments. Peter is behind this. I doubt that it's the case. I have known the guy for 10+ years and he never had a problem with people overshadowing him. He is not insecure, and if he's got a problem with someone's actions, he'll say it. He wouldn't send his coworkers' girlfriends to harass a person on his behalf. Commenter, NTA. April has a thing for Peter and sees you as a threat. She's going to find ways to criticize you and tear you down no matter what you do. OOP. I guess it also didn't help that Peter kept his hand on my back for most of the evening, and when he got absolutely wasted, put his face in my hair. Commenter. So maybe it's not just April's imagination that you're a threat to her attempts to connect with Peter. OOP. I think the biggest threat is Peter being arrow ace and the way April behaves, not me. Commenter. Could he possibly be demiromantic? Because Peter's behavior that you're describing present as a little bit more than platonic. Keeping his arm around you, smelling your hair. Those are often actions, though not exclusively OOFC, exhibited by people towards a paramour, or crush, of some degree. And yes, April is the problem. OOP, according to him, he is arrow ace. And he wasn't smelling my hair, more like rubbing his face on the top of my head. He says it's because he likes how my hair feels. He plays with my hair often enough, and when he gets a little too drunk he faces plants into it, though he did it mostly back when we were in uni. Knowing him, it could just be a texture thing. The others liking the outfit. At some point I ended up with like 4 very drunk people rubbing the moth's body. I made it from faux fur, and by extension my back, with their fingers. Was a weird experience to say the least. The outfit, I had help when it came to drafting the suit from someone who actually knows what they are doing. LOL. The shirt was made from a bunch of squares, so no problems there. The embroidery is all split stitches and faux fur for the body of the moth. I really made it sound much more impressive than it is. OOP is voted NTA update. This morning showed Peter the post and all of the messages from April and co. Never heard him be this angry. Said he'll deal with them. Turns out April is a pathological liar and had been telling everyone in the office that Peter and her are in a relationship, but are keeping it low-key. She also was taking pictures of him every time she walked by his office and showing them to her friends as proof. So her friends thought that I was trying to steal her man. They aren't even co-workers. She just greets clients at the front desk at the firm Peter works at. Peter ripped her a new one. Their boss, April's uncle, ripped her a new one. The co-worker she lied to ripped her a new one. April ended up throwing a tantrum, and the police were called. The results? April is currently on a 48-hour hold. Peter is moving to work from home full-time. I apologize to April's uncle, mom, and a few friends and co-workers. My stepmother abused my fiancé's young brother, causing a family rift that threatens to destroy our wedding and relationships forever. Original post. Mention of child Abu *E. It's not too graphic, but it's there. I tried posting this on AITA through a different account a couple days ago, but it didn't work out. Given the trigger warning, I'm not surprised. I have since concluded my wife and I did the right thing, so this will be my last attempt to post this story. I tried to add some info and change the wording a little. All names are fake. My 28M stepmother, 49F, is a wannabe party planner. She has taken it upon herself to plan and host every party and holiday my dad's family has thrown since she married him. I never loved those occasions growing up. She's controlling and gets upset if people complain about anything, but humored her for my dad's sake. According to him, this helps her feel included. I'm getting married to my fiancée Jane, 26F, in July. We got engaged in early 2021, but Jane ended up getting pregnant a couple months after that, and we decided to postpone the wedding to focus on our son for a while. So we've had a long engagement. My stepmother has tried to hijack our wedding plans from day one, complaining, contacting our planner, showing up unannounced to Jane's dress appointments, etc., and we have repeatedly asked her to stop. Dad wants us to humor her, but she's clearly resentful of the fact that she's not hosting the wedding or being labeled mother of the groom in invitations. Besides our baby boy, we also have Luke, 4M, Jane's paternal half-brother. She got custody of him a few months into our relationship, after his parents died. I ended up moving in with them during the pandemic, and have been in Luke's life since he was a baby. He doesn't call me dad, and refers to us as his sister and his OP, but we love him like a son. Stepmother, though, hates Luke. She accuses Jane of baby-trapping her way into the family. That accusation only got worse after our son was born. My dad gets along with Jane and adores the kids, but stepmother demands him to refuse babysitting Luke, so we don't leave the kids with them often. Instead, Jane's brother and CL usually watch the kids for us, as their children are close to ours in age. We had a thing last Sunday, and my Bill was out of town with his family. Jane's other siblings live in different cities, as well as my mom and sister. My dad agreed to babysit at our place, and we left. We came back to find both kids crying, stepmother screaming, and dad weakly trying to calm everyone down. Apparently, Luke had told stepmother that both he and our son were going to be our ring bearers, and she went ballistic. She screamed that she wasn't going to allow that because he wasn't family. She then made me need to include the trigger warning when he started crying. His lip is still split. She'd never gotten to this point before. We immediately banned her from our house and from our wedding. Dad is fuming and has said he's not going without her. He's also convinced half of his side of the family, by severely downplaying what stepmother did, to boycott the wedding as well. This includes my stepbrother, who fully agrees with his mother no matter how many times I try to tell him the truth. Me and Jane are refusing to budge, but many of my cousins who aren't coming anymore are asking us to reconsider. Pretty much all of Jane's family agrees with us, but one of her aunts has suggested that maybe stepmother is acting out because she doesn't feel welcomed by my family. I've honestly had it with my family enabling her behavior. I love my dad and really want him at my wedding, but I am more than willing to go and see if it means protecting my family. Edit. I think I accidentally deleted the paragraph where I mentioned this, but we did press charges. We took Luke to the pediatrician the next day and gathered every piece of evidence we had. Not only did we have pictures of Luke's face, but by some miraculous strike of luck, we also had nanny cam footage. Some commenters were right to assume that my SM hadn't been invited to our house, but my dad hasn't really gone anywhere without her in years, so we took precautions. We didn't expect her to actually do anything this awful, but we've never trusted her with the kids. The physical attack happened off camera, but there is some footage of her screaming and Luke crying before and after the event. She now has a child abuse charge on her rap sheet. We wouldn't let her get away with this. Edit 2. There is a lot of additional info I want to add. I'll try to respond to at least some of the comments. I did not expect the amount I've gotten so far, but all I'll add for now is that Luke is okay. The visit to the pediatrician happened the day after. He already had a counselor. Jane was pretty traumatized when her dad and stepmom died, and was worried it would rub off on him, and will continue treatment. We've been hugging and pampering him a little more than usual too. He's still upset, but is already doing much better. Update 1. I want to thank everybody who took the time to read and/or comment on my previous post. It's been a tough week, but it's always great to know that people care. I haven't been able to reply to every comment, but I will try to address some in this update. This might get a little long. I'll start off by saying that me and Jane are going NC with my dad and SM. We haven't really spoken to either of them since the incident, and I don't plan on being the one to reach out. Any communication between us is being handled by my younger sister. She's completely on our side, but will remain in low contact for the time being. I've decided to adopt Jane's way of dealing with people she cares about. Forgive what's apologized for, but never forget. Basically, if Dad or SM ever truly understand what they did wrong and sincerely apologize, we're willing to forgive them, even if begrudgingly so, but we will never ignore, or let them forget, what they did to our family. And for the time being, neither of them will be allowed near Luke, our baby, and any other kids we may have in the future, even if we do forgive them. As for the rest of my family, I read a lot of comments suggesting that I post pictures of Luke's face, as well as the nanny cam footage. I'm not very active on social media, but even if I was, I'm not comfortable exposing my injured preschooler like that, especially given that nothing on the internet ever truly goes away. I also decided not to share the pictures with my family unless truly necessary. I should probably mention that while my family adores my dad, most of them aren't very fond of SM. She had 2 failed marriages prior to meeting my father, the first of which resulted in my stepbrother, and he cheated on his then girlfriend to be with her. My family loved that girlfriend and disliked SM right away. Not only has she been controlling and manipulative since the beginning, she's also tried to force her way into the family matriarch role by any means possible. Taking over planning duties for every family event was her favorite way to do it, because of all the attention and compliments that come with it. The main reason why I hated these parties growing up was because she'd always find a way to make everything about her, including Christmas and mine and my sister's birthdays. The rest of the family felt neutral about it, but they never liked her. With Luke, it was different. Most of my relatives didn't meet him until COVID restrictions got looser, and by then he was 2 years old. He's a bright and genuinely lovable kid, and there weren't really any other small children in the family, so everyone immediately started cooing over him. The way I see it, SM got upset that Jane and Luke were accepted by my family so easily compared to her experience, and that's why she resents them both, but I can't confirm that. She was also mad that, aside from not being the planner, she would have absolutely no involvement in the wedding party. She tried to pressure us into letting her officiate. One of Jane's best friends was offered that role a year ago, making stepbrother my best man. He wasn't interested and I'd already gotten my best friend, or asking her sister's daughter to be our flower girl. We'd promised Jane's 3-year-old niece. Also, her sister's daughter is 15 and doesn't know us. She also tried to convince us to let my dad walk Jane down the aisle, since her father's gone, but her eldest brother, the Bill I mentioned in the first post, had already been enlisted. SM was disappointed that my family wasn't as involved in the wedding as Jane's, and kept making comments about how that would never happen if we put her in charge. All of that being said, there's nothing that can excuse being that awful to a child, especially if it really is the petty jealousy that I suspect. Because I haven't spoken with my father, my sister has been keeping me updated on what he's been up to. As I found out through her, the story my dad and SM told the rest of the family completely erases Luke's injury and the abuse charges. It insinuates that me and Jane banned them because we got annoyed with SM and decided to take it out on my dad as well. Because most people already disliked SM, explaining what actually happened that night wasn't hard, and most of the relatives that I actually wanted at the wedding have apologized and are berating my dad as well. The people that didn't believe us, as well as those saying we overreacted, have been told they are not welcome in our home anymore. Those are mostly people from my dad's generation, so I can't say I'm surprised. But the realization that they are so biased they're willing to protect a woman they hate after she hurt a child, just to make my dad happy, has reassured me that I don't need any of them in my life. Stepbrother is still in denial. He refuses to believe his mother could hurt a child, even with all the evidence we have. I have to admit I understand. I love my mom too, but that doesn't mean I'd excuse his obliviousness. So he's banned too. It sucks, because we were close growing up, but I don't regret it. Besides, Jane has 3 other siblings besides Luke, the older Bill, a twin brother and a younger sister, and I'm closer to them than I ever was to him. Speaking of Jane's family, they're all furious over what happened, and have been extremely supportive of us. Jane's maternal family basically adopted Luke after she got custody of him, and have called frequently to make sure he's okay. We did manage to save some money with everybody we uninvited, and have decided to use it to help Jane's cousin. She lives in a different country, and was previously unable to come to the wedding, so we're paying for her plane ticket. Luke has gotten much better, and is almost completely back to being the sunny child he's always been. The split lip was shallow. It's healing slowly, but didn't require any stitches. We sat him down a few days ago, and explained that my dad and stepmonster wouldn't be around anymore. He really liked my dad, but understands that he and SM are attached at the hip. He's clearly scared of her, but we're doing our best to make him feel safe. Me and Jane have reassured him that he is family. We love him, and no one will ever change that. I'm not too worried about Dad or SM trying to show up at the wedding, but we've alerted the venue and given them pictures just in case they try anything. Better safe than sorry. Some people brought attention to the fact that SM is a hypocrite for saying Luke isn't family. I agree, for obvious reasons. Her main excuse for pretty much everything she does is that she doesn't feel like my family welcomes her. Dad has been guilting me to take part in everything she plans by reminding us of that for as long as I can remember. The way he continues to make excuses for her without realizing this is basically a case of the pot calling the kettle black, except Luke actually is family, is what has made me accept that, while I will always love my dad, it's not healthy or safe for me and my family to be around him anymore. It hurts to know my son won't have his only remaining bio-grandfather in his life, but he has two amazing step-grandpas to make up for it. For now, I'm sad, but satisfied with how things have turned out. I don't like to complain about my life. It's a mess, but a beautiful one. I love my fiancé, I love my kids, and I'm lucky enough to love my job. We're happy. I'm not letting anyone ruin that. To whoever was annoyed at my censorship. When posting on AITA didn't work out, Jane suggested I make the writing less explicit. I'm not used to Reddit yet, so I might have overdone it a little bit. I hope this is my last update on this story, but I'll keep you posted. Again, thank you for all your love and support. Best wishes to all of you. Relevant comments from OOP. The only reason why I know that this is the first time she's hit him is because this was the first and last time she was with the kids unsupervised. Me and Jane were around every previous time she saw Luke. She didn't want my dad to babysit him, and we'd only asked him to on a few occasions before. My sister was still living with them at the time, and has assured me that Luke was never out of her sight. I know and trust my sister enough to believe her. First time or not, I will not give her a second chance. She'll never hurt either of my kids again. OOP when told to secure passwords with all vendors. We've actually had passwords with the vendors since day one. Some of the earlier ones we met actually recommended us to do it. SM did contact our planner a while back saying she had our approval to talk to our vendors. She didn't let her, and we got a bit more strict with passwords after that. Commenter: so is SM serving any jail time? If she attacked a child then and you guys pressed charges, I would imagine she would have to be processed and eventually serve some time for her crime. OOP: we hope so. We're setting up a date for the arraignment. Commenter: start a file for SM. Keep any and all texts, voicemails, and attempts of her communicating. Do the same with anyone who has taken her side because she could escalate, and you may need that info. Those people are flying monkeys, and she's sent them to not only plead her case, but report back to her the things you may have told them so she can continue to play her victim card. You were great to have the nanny cam, but should also make sure to notify his daycare or school that she is not to be given info or access to him. Get cameras that have audio just in case she shows up at your house, and password protect all of your wedding vendors and let them know not to give her any info and to notify you if she tries. Your dad may be harmless, but she's not. OOP: that second advice is something we've been pretty occupied with, actually. This past week has been mostly about the kids and collecting evidence, but I'll definitely check out the J and Mill sub. Commenter: did you say that if your father and stepmonster apologize that you will allow them at your wedding? I wasn't quite sure what you were saying. OOP: absolutely not. My father and SM are not welcome at the wedding, no matter the circumstances. They could offer me an island and I'd still refuse to let them come back into our lives right now. I only plan to forgive anything far off in the future, and only if they apologize sincerely. Even then, they will have no access to the kids for years after that. Knowing SM, I highly doubt she'll ever feel sorry for what she did, so we're not counting on it anyway. Update 2. I'll start off by, probably, disappointing a lot of people. We're coming to terms with the fact that it's unlikely SM will get anything more than a slap on the wrist. Me and Jane are discussing our next move with our lawyer, but we're still not sure how we're going to move forward. It's too early to tell anyway, so we're trying not to get ahead of ourselves any more than we already have. However, I'm relieved to announce that we're getting started on the process for a restraining order against SM. We're using the same evidence we gathered the week following the incident, including the nanny cam footage and pictures of Luke, and we'll focus on that for the time being. I still haven't spoken to my father. My sister is still in LC, but is seriously considering cutting ties with him. Because my sister is the only one on my side that still talks to him, my father keeps trying to ask her about me, and whether I've calmed down yet. According to her, he's annoyed that half of his family refuses to talk to him, but still doesn't seem to accept why. I told my sister that she doesn't need to keep playing messenger pigeon between me and our father. I never asked her to do it, and it's clearly taking a toll on her. But she insists she'll stop when it feels right. By the way, there's absolutely no doubt whether SM attacked Luke. Not only did Luke say at the moment we got home, but that was also confirmed by my father in a failed attempt to defend her behavior. He never tried to hide it from us. That, and the fact that he gave Luke an ice bag, is literally the only positive thing I can say about his actions. And SM was too busy screaming about how much of a whining brat Luke was being to deny it. To those who guessed SM is younger than my dad, you get an invisible cookie. She's also 5 years younger than his previous girlfriend. They got together when I was around 15. Also, my stepbrother is only a month older than me. She turns 50 later this year, had him at 21, married his father a year later. Both our kids are doing mostly okay. Luke's back to running around the house in his Superman costume whenever he doesn't have anything better to do. He did have a few nightmares this past week and is asked to sleep on our bed twice. We don't mention my father around him, and he's still seeing his counselor. Our 14-month-old son has learned 2 new words, hi and bye, and Luke is trying to teach him to say his name. Jane's sister, who moved away for college, is coming over for a couple days to celebrate her 21st birthday later this month. Luke's excited to see her, and Jane's excited to get drunk with her. Can't say I blame her. We're hoping her presence will cheer us all up. I'm not doing so good, and neither is Jane. She's usually the kind of person who tries to keep her negative emotions to herself, but she cried herself to sleep almost every night the week it happened. It breaks my heart to see her like that, and I can't help but feel like this is my fault. There's a part of me trying to tell myself I had no way of knowing SM would do anything like that, but that doesn't really change anything. I allowed my father near my kids unsupervised, even though I knew she'd probably tag along. This is the guiltiest I've ever felt, and I don't think I'll ever forgive myself. Jane has been improving lately, and is trying to convince me to see a therapist. I've never really done that before, apart from a psychiatrist when I was younger, but now feels like a good time to give it a try. I was surprised by a few messages this week from people telling me to forgive my father and SM, as well as re-invite them to the wedding. That's not happening. In fact, I'm not willing to ever forgive SM. My dad has now degraded to a huge maybe, but I will never understand or forget what she did. Also, though the wedding is the last thing on our minds right now, we're not postponing it. We considered rescheduling, but the date we'd settled on is pretty much the only one that works for our guests. We have passwords with all our vendors, and gave them all clear instructions not to talk to anyone but us. Jane's family is bigger and closer to each other, which is why they're more involved in the wedding than mine, but I do have family participating. My sister is one of the bridesmaids, 2 of my cousins are groomsmen, and my mom is walking down the aisle with the wedding party. Going through all of this with Jane has made me understand even more just how much I love this woman. I couldn't ask for a better partner to start a family with, and I have no idea what I'd do without her. This didn't tear us apart, and I couldn't be more thankful. I probably won't make any more updates until after the wedding, unless something big happens. In the meantime, as always, best wishes to all of you. Update 3. I didn't plan on updating again before the wedding, but something pretty huge happened. The good news is we got the RO. The bad news is me and Jane had to see both SM and my father at the court hearing. This was our first time seeing them since we kicked them out of our house over a month ago, and neither of us were looking forward to it. We left the kids with Jane's brother and Sil, so at least Luke didn't have to see them. The hearing itself went a lot quicker than I expected. I'll give credit where it's due. My father was, at the very least, smart enough to understand there was no way they were winning this. There was a lot of evidence against them. Not only did we have the nanny cam footage and Luke's pictures and medical record, but my sister had also gathered every text and email SM had sent her and the family about what happened. And SM hates speaking on the phone, so there were a lot of those. They didn't even bother to get an attorney for the hearing. The judge granted us a protection order against SM. She's not allowed within 500 feet of us or our property anymore. We're changing all our locks this week, and I'm thinking about changing my phone number as well. I have to admit, the moment we left the courthouse was the safest I'd felt since this whole ordeal started. Jane was close to tearing up with joy when we got to the car. We picked up the kids and went to McDonald's with Bill and his family to celebrate. Hours later, my father called me. The order doesn't extend to him, so he can still do that. Jane and the kids were in bed, so I answered. I didn't expect him to change his mind and apologize all of a sudden, but decided to give him one last chance. He tried to start some awkward small talk, but I told him to get to the point. He asked me if the order was truly necessary. I stated, very clearly, that SM was never coming near Jane or my children again, and that I was glad I had an RO to formalize that. Every excuse he had for SM was pretty easy to shut down, but she only hit him once. Yep, and that's enough for me. The kids need their grandma. She's not their grandma, Mom is. She's my wife. You need to respect her. She attacked Luke. She disrespected my family in my own house. I don't owe her anything, least of all my respect. He then went on a rant about family, how much of a godsend SM was and everything she'd done for me and my sister since she came into our lives. I replied by listing every time I could remember about her lying, overstepping a boundary or acting unhinged around me, my family, or my sister. I brought up both my adult life and my youth. Examples included her attempts to hijack most of our milestones. Recently, our wedding plans, our son's birth, Jane's baby shower, and my sister's college graduation. Her obsession with the idea of a perfect family, and her disgusting attitude towards Luke. I also made sure to mention her habits of going through mine and my sister's stuff when we were younger. It's trivial, compared to everything else, but this behavior went on until my sister moved out of their house, only 3 months ago. We're pretty sure she found out about Jane's wedding dress appointments by reading my sister's planner while she wasn't home, for instance. Some of the memories I mentioned are long and hard to explain, but they did cement the fact that SM means nothing to me. He tried to go with the whole, she doesn't feel included excuse again, but I shut him up. I said he'd had the opportunity to protect his grandchildren, but had chosen his monster of a wife instead, and that's enough for me to want nothing to do with him. I hung up without saying goodbye. My sister told me he called her afterwards, and she told him she was going NC with him as well. I think we're both starting to accept our father won't change. It sucks, but he's made his priorities clear, and his children and grandkids aren't among them. For now, that's it. Now that they're fresh in my mind, I'm thinking about sharing some of the stories I reminded my father of, but that's gonna take a while. Until then, as always, best wishes to all of you. Relevant comments. Commenter. But she only hit him once would have ended the phone call for me. OOP, I almost hung up on him when he said that. The only reason I didn't was because I knew I wasn't going to talk to him again anytime soon, and I still had a lot to say. Commenter. I am curious how your stepbrother is handling all of this. Like, the RO is something you can't just push away. A judge stated that what his mother did was so terrible she needed to stay away from those children. It just feels like something you can't stick your head in the sand and claim that you could never believe that your mother could hurt someone like that. OOP, I haven't spoken to him since days before the RO, and he hasn't tried to contact me or my sister. He was still in denial last time we talked, but seemed a bit doubtful. TBH, I think he's the only one who isn't a complete lost cause and still has a slight chance of coming around. He's still banned, but I might be willing to talk to him about this whole thing. Commenter. Holy hell. If you are comfortable sharing, I know many of us would want to hear those hijacking stories. Hope the kids don't have too terribly long an impact on their life from this, especially the preschooler. OOP. Luke hasn't mentioned her in a while. I don't doubt he was affected by this, but I think he understands everything is okay now. Our baby is barely a year old. And if it's up to me, he won't even know she exists until he's grown. I'll definitely share some of the stories as soon as I can bring myself to write them down. Commenter. It's crazy how the court gave your dad a chance not to give him the protection order and you gave him a chance to explain on the phone and he still managed to screw up. You guys gave so many chances and your dad fails to see that SM is a bad person. Your dad doesn't seem like he's going to change, and until he does, somehow stop giving him more chances. OP, that was his last chance and he blew it. If he ever comes around, and that's a big if, it'll still take me a long time to allow him back into our lives. Update 4. After being engaged for over 2 years, me and Jane finally got married last Saturday. We're still getting used to calling each other husband and wife, but we'll get there. Hopefully. The wedding was awesome. The kids had fun, our extended families finally met, and we danced so much I could barely stand the next day. Luke took his ring bearer duties seriously, and held my son's hand as they walked down the aisle. Besides my aunt getting shit-faced and being let out on a wheelchair, which I already thought would happen anyway, everything went according to plan. It's been 4 months since we got the RO against SM. Things have been mostly quiet, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Except completely quiet, but we can't always get what we want. I never really worried about SM showing up at the wedding, especially after the RO. It's literally illegal for her to come close to us, and we made it very clear that if she tried, we'd call the cops right away. My friends still warned me to take safety measures, most of which I did. SM didn't show up, of course, but I'm a strong believer that any money spent on security is well spent, so no regrets on that end. My stepbrother and I wished each other happy birthdays, and he also texted Jane on hers back in June. That's the only contact we've had during these months. He knows that the door is still open if he wants to apologize. My dad has given up on trying to reach me. We haven't spoken since April. He's still trying to talk to my sister, for some reason, but she's ignoring him. A few days after she went NC with him, they had a huge fight over the phone about SM's treatment of us over the years. Insults were thrown, sore subjects were brought up, and, most importantly, my father took SM's side on almost everything. My sister called me crying afterwards. I wanted to call him and yell at him, but she told me not to. She's doing okay now. She hasn't blocked him, but doesn't take his calls or answer his texts. She's only gotten 3, a weak apology, one on my birthday back in May, and a long rant after neither of us wished him a happy Father's Day. After all, despite our differences, he's still our father. He's not wrong. I love my father, and I always will, but I can't be around him anymore. While I've closed that door, I'm not locking it just yet. He knows what he needs to do if he wants his family back. I don't think he'll do it, but if there's the slightest chance he might, I'll consider opening the door an inch or two. This is my wife's suggestion. I'm a lot less optimistic than she is, but maybe it's important to hold on to that hope. She hasn't forgiven him though. Or SM, Jane has always been very protective of Luke, so it was no surprise that this disaster shook her. A part of me was scared she'd blame me, but she called me a dumbass when I told her that. I've been in therapy for a few months, and it's helped a lot more than I thought it would. I've realized SM's behavior around me growing up was a lot worse than I always thought, and it's great to finally be able to get my feelings off my chest. Right now, I'm more than happy. I just married the most amazing woman ever, and I have the family I always dreamed of. None of us are perfect, but I never thought life would be this great to me. I'll stick around. Reddit is a lot more than I expected, but I can sleep peacefully now, so it's safe to say this will be my last update on this. Thank you all for the kindness and advice you gave me these months. I could have never expected the support I got from you guys, and I can't begin to describe how helpful it was. Seriously, thank you all. Edit 3 days later. Okay, I updated too soon. I didn't want to write another post, so I'll just add this here. My stepbrother called me earlier today. Apparently, he and SM had a fight and he wants to meet up. I agreed as long as it was just the two of us. We're meeting up for coffee on Wednesday. I have no idea what to expect, but even if he does apologize, I need to know he understands how and why he let us down. New update. Hey guys. I've been away from Reddit for a few months, due to some stuff at work. But a lot of people have been messaging me about my stepbrother, so I want to give you a small update. I've been busy and tired these days, so I might gloss over some details. Feel free to ask me anything. I first met my stepbrother for coffee back in August. He'd had a fight with SM and the RO was brought up. She'd lied to him about some details, accusing Luke of picking on my baby, bad-mouthing Jane and more, but this time, he managed to force her to tell him the truth. My stepbrother started to reevaluate his relationship with his mother. After talking to his therapist and his friends about it, as well as the way she'd raised him, he finally accepted I wasn't exaggerating about what she did to Luke. He wanted to talk to me back in June, but didn't want to distract me and Jane from the wedding. Me and my stepbrother spent the last 4 months working on rebuilding our relationship. We've been meeting for coffee or lunch and discussing his mother and what she did to our lives and my kids. Jane started joining us in October, and the kids saw him again for the first time 2 weeks ago. Things were awkward between us for a while, but we're good now. He's also making amends with my sister. In early November, he completely cut contact with SM. Jane and the kids are doing amazing. Luke turned 5 in September, and our baby will be 2, holy crap, in early February. We're spending the holidays with Jane's family in Brazil, while my stepbrother stays with his girlfriend. Things are great, that's all. I'm signing off for now. I'll let you know if anything happens. Happy holidays, everyone. Best wishes to all of you. My husband made me stop believing in soulmates. Now, after 15 years, he's finally opened up and strengthened our love even more. My husband made me believe soulmates aren't real. I am using a different account so that my husband doesn't know. Before meeting my current husband, I was married to my ex-husband Dave. Dave and I met when we were 5 years old. He moved into our neighborhood when he was 5. He was this cute boy next door. We became inseparable. Even our parents joked that when we would be adults we would be married. Ever since I knew the concept of marriage, I was determined that I would marry Dave. We were like soulmates. We had the same interests, the same hobbies, the similar thoughts. He was my first everything. My first kiss, my first boyfriend. The guy I lost my virginity to. Among our friends we were the perfect couple. After graduating high school, we immediately got married. I got into a good school, but I decided to study with Dave. We got married right after we finished high school. Our parents helped us find an apartment closer to our school. We worked hard. We would often talk about having kids. On our 6th anniversary, we decided that we would try for a baby next year. I still remember the day when we were teenagers and cuddling. We already decided what our babies' names would be. During our 7th year of marriage, my mom got sick, so I had to stay with her for a while. I was planning to do something special for our 7th year anniversary, so I left early to surprise him. I went to my bedroom and there I saw my husband fucking another girl in our marital bed. I can never get that image out of my head. My husband saw me and his face turned pale. I don't know what happened, but I threw up right in the spot. My husband was giving me the usual, "It's not what it looks like. I am sorry. It was a mistake." I locked myself in the bathroom. I somehow mustered my strength and called my friend to pick me up and just don't listen to Dave. When my friend arrived, she charged at Dave. She grabbed some of my things and we left. I was in a catatonic stage at that point. Eventually, my parents knew. They supported whatever decision I would make. Dave's parents, however, wanted us to be together. There was a huge fight, but eventually we settled for divorce. My whole fairy tale fantasy just shattered. I was spiraling into depression. My parents booked me for therapy. For 2 years I was like a living corpse. After that, my friend pushed me to go on a date. I did, but no one even came close to Dave. I was searching for Dave in every guy, but they all failed to live up to the expectation. That is when I met my now husband, Jay. Jay was the opposite of Dave. Dave was funny. He would be the life of the party. I remember one time he made me laugh so hard that I fell from my chair. But Jay was not funny like Dave. He would use humor only as clapbacks, and if he wants to insult someone. He was also very stoic and closed off. Pretty boring to my taste. On our first date, I asked him some questions like, "What is your favorite movie?" He told me he doesn't watch movies. He likes reading. He didn't even ask me a thing, except for my educational background. He talked mostly about my field of work, but he was not interested in me. We ate dinner in silence. I was 100% sure he would not call me. But 2 days later he did. He asked me out on a second date. I was skeptical of whether or not I should go, but my friend insisted. I gave it another try. Second date went slightly better than the first. He talked a bit more, asked a few questions. We were taking it slow. He was opening up until the 6th date when he finally hooked up. TMI. It was amazing. I am someone who has a snack after having sex. I was craving for some, so I asked him if I could grab something from his pantry. Even a bread and cheese sandwich will do. He told me to stay there and he went out. I was kinda confused. He came back after 20 minutes with takeout food. It was something I really liked, orange chicken. I asked how he knew. He told me, "You told me on our previous date." I melted right there. Dave and I have been together for most of my life, but he never made the effort of going out and get me something. That's when I knew even if he was not my soulmate, I was madly in love with him. We dated for 3 years and got married. I came to know about Jay's family too. His mom and dad were drug addicts who died of overdose. He was homeless for a while but worked his way up. Throughout our marriage I was very, very happy. He was different from Dave because whenever he would see me doing chores he would ask, "Need help?" He helped me through my trauma from Dave by arranging a therapist that specializes in infidelity. He may not be a person of words, but his actions tell me that he loves me. When I was pregnant with our daughter, I would wake him up in the middle of the night to either get me food or rub my feet. He would say, "Yes, ma'am," and get to work. I love him. Even after 15 years of marriage, my love has not stopped. He is still the stoic man I fell in love with. After meeting him, I stopped believing in the concept of a soulmate. He was not mine, but we somehow made it work. I love you, Jay. Thanks for being there in my life. And anyone who is wondering what happened to Dave, he is getting his 3rd divorce. His mom blames me for his downfall, but she refuses to see that her son cheated on his every marriage. Edit. I am sorry if there was any typing mistake. I am typing on my phone and the autocorrect is acting nuts. I tried to turn it off, but it didn't work. Relevant comments. Commenter. Who knows, maybe Jay is your soulmate. He seems to be more ideally suited to you from the beginning than Dave ever was. OOP, from the outside we do not look like soulmates. Dave and I were the typical girl next door and boy next door kind of people. Jay was more closed off. Initially when I was dating him he was really rude in my opinion. He also has a bad temper towards people who screw up. But other than that he is good and kind. He helps those who genuinely need help. Commenter. After reading this, all I can say is fuck Dave, metaphorically, and fuck Jay, literally, in several positions, then have a nice dessert. I'm glad to hear you are happy. Hope you, Jay, and your kids have many, many more happy years ahead of you. OOP, fuck Jay, literally, in several positions, then have a nice dessert. I have been doing that for 18 years, LOL. And he still gets me snack. Commenter. His mom blames me for his downfall. Because it can't be the fault of her fucking child being an immoral, faulty human being, could it? I am poly. I have a different attitude to sex around a relationship, but promises are promises regardless. Commitment is commitment no matter what flavor, and Dave is clearly emotionally incomplete. I never believed in soulmates, from childhood, but you know when it works, when it's right, you just had to have a trial marriage to refine your definition. OOP. According to his mom, he was devastated when I wanted divorce. She tried to convince me to stay with him even after knowing he cheated. She was angry at me and my parents when I said no. She blames me because she thinks that if I had stayed, her son would not have become a serial cheater because I could fix him. His other marriage failed because he was a mess because of me, not because he was fucking other people on the side. Commenter. Dave was never your soulmate. Jay was. Just took time to find him. OOP. When I asked Jay about if he believes in soulmates, he told me, I don't believe that crap. It's just like a horoscope. People believe in it because it makes them feel better. A lot of potential good relationships get broken because of this crap. I was kinda devastated that he doesn't believe in soulmates. Can you believe in these 18 years, we have only said I love you only 5 times as far as I can count. I wanna say it more. I said I love you to my husband after 5 years. My husband, 47M, and I, 46F, have been together for 18 years and married for 15. My husband is not the type who always shows his feelings. He is very stoic, smiles on very few occasions, and maintains a routine. Some even say that he is a robot, but I don't think so. I am someone who is very outgoing and completely the opposite of him. Before I was married to him, I was married to someone else who cheated on me. I used to say I love you a lot in my first marriage. But after my divorce, I had some sort of aversion to those words. Over the last 18 years, we have said I love you only 5 times. First time was when we were dating, second was on our wedding day, third and fourth when our daughter and son were born, and the 5th was 5 years ago on Christmas when we were really tipsy because of the drinks. I wrote a post about how I met him and how we got together, but it made me realize that we haven't said I love you to each other for a long time. But it didn't bother me. Even if he never said it, he always shows that he loves me in his actions. He does chores for me, he would always give me a foot massage, make me my favorite dish, even kiss me out of the blue. I do not have any complaints. He is the best husband anyone could ever ask for. But this was something that has been in the back of my mind for a while. We cuddle, we hang out, we make love, but still no I love yous. I would love to hear it and say it more often, but somehow it just makes me nervous. I decided to buckle up and just say it. It's just 3 words. So yesterday when he was reading a book on the couch, I stood in front of him and said, I love you. He looked at me and was confused. I repeated it. For the first time, I could see him get flustered. He told me okay. I was a little disappointed by his response. I thought he just didn't love me anymore. Later that night when I was lying down, he came to our bedroom and told me that he was sorry for his response, that it caught him off guard. He told me that he loves me a lot, and not even a day goes by that he doesn't feel lucky to have me in his life. I was tearing up. That was better than my confession. I asked him why we don't say that often. He told me that he doesn't say it because throughout his entire life no one has said it to him except for me. His parents were drug addicts who cared less for him. He had to start working at 14. He grew up in hardships, so saying I love you is weird for him. But also he feels like we didn't have to tell each other when we express it with our actions way more. I told him I want to say it more now and want him to say it back if that's okay with him. I saw him smile for a while and he said it is fine as long as I want it. I don't think we need to say it when we know we love each other a lot. We will probably stop saying it after a few days and go back to our mundane events, LOL. A lot of you people have been asking me and personally messaging me about Jay's upbringing and how he managed to survive. Well, I am not sure if I'm the right person to talk about his personal life. I mean, I heard some parts which really made me cry. Therefore, I will try to summarize it. So my husband Jay is an only child. His mom and dad were from a poor family. They were drug addicts. His household was a mess. He remembers his father pushing him down the stairs when he was like 8. Jay mostly grew up with his grandfather, his mom's dad. As far as I know, his mom was not allowed to come to his grandfather's house. Jay mostly spent his weekdays at his house. His mom and dad didn't care. They were always high and had odd visitors. His grandfather taught him a lot of things, like handling tools, woodwork, electric repair stuff. Ever since he was little, with some advice from his grandfather, he learned that his parents are very useless. He has to survive on his own. All they know is how to do drugs and invite people to have group sex. He started doing odd jobs like dog sitting, car and window washing, gardening. He also tutored from time to time. Shortly after, his parents died of overdose. He became a permanent resident of his grandfather's house. He worked so that he could afford to go to college. His grandfather had little money for him, but it wasn't enough. He thought about joining the army at 18, but he failed the physical test. When he was 17, his grandfather died of a heart attack. His grandfather lived in a rented house, so Jay couldn't live there anymore. He was forced to live in a homeless shelter throughout his high school. He even got bullied and got in trouble for standing up for his bullies. But since he was a good student, he didn't face serious repercussions. He left the homeless shelter when a pastor from their local church took him in. He knew Jay because he worked in the church for a while. The pastor was a nice guy. He funded his living and also helped him get a scholarship to a good university. Jay studied finance and business. His entire childhood, he lived in poverty. So he was obsessed with learning how to make money. He made some connections which landed him a good part-time job during his final year. I met Jay through my friend. She worked in the same company as him. He worked as an investment banker at the time. And the rest you all know. This is pretty much it. I understand why he is so stoic and doesn't show his emotions. I once asked out of curiosity that he saw the harsh reality of life but still how he manages to stay good. He once told me about this couple whose children he used to tutor. They were a really happy family in his eyes. The husband loved his wife. He mentioned that the husband would always have a hand on his wife's body as a form of affection. Their children were also well behaved and had a good childhood. From that moment he knew he wanted a family like that, because he never had a complete family. But he was sure that somebody would not be able to love him because he doesn't know how to show love. Throughout his entire childhood he has only seen his parents fight and cheat on each other in front of each other. That really destroyed his perception of love. If it wasn't for that couple, he probably wouldn't believe that there are people in this world who can love each other for life. It is a little wrong of me to say he displays no emotions. He does, but on rare occasions. I remember the day our daughter was born. Jay held her and cried loudly. He kept repeating, "I will protect you. I will never leave you." He did say "I love you" to both me and her. Same thing happened when our son was born. I mean, it gave me an idea to just pop out babies so that I can see his emotional face, haha. But anyways, I know he does love me and our little family. He always holds me tight whenever we are cuddling. He is really good with my parents. My parents also adore him. Sometimes, it just makes me cry knowing that he has been through a lot and I have lived such a sheltered life. Sometimes, I feel like I don't deserve him because he is very kind and a good person. Also, yeah, we do say "I love you" a lot more now. Final update. I just wanted to give big thanks to everyone who has been kind and supportive. I cannot imagine that so many people will come through because of my post. A lot of you suggested therapy. I did in the past, but my husband brushed it off by saying his past rarely bothers him. Thanks to people on Reddit, I suggested to him some articles on PTSD and childhood trauma. He studied for a bit and found a therapist for him to help him with his trauma. He only had 2 sessions till now. A few days ago he came home from work and I went to greet him like usual. He pulled in for a big hug and started sobbing. I told him it's okay. We went to our bedroom where we sat down and talked. He told me that he was sorry for being so ice cold all these years. He opened up more and said he was afraid to confront his demons, so he just kept them back in his head. He had trouble expressing how he felt. He felt guilty that he didn't say he loves more often. I am just paraphrasing what he told me. I love you with all my heart. I know I don't say it, but I feel it every day and every moment. I am sorry for taking away all those years from you, for not expressing my love for you. Words cannot express what you actually mean to me. You gave me my kids, made my house a home. I never had that growing up. I always wanted that, and you made it happen. I am sorry that I was so cold and never said I love you more. Because I do. I love you a lot. I want to make it up to you. I don't want to waste another second of my life burying those emotions anymore. It feels good to see him vulnerable for the first time in his life. I cried with him that night. We talked a lot about our marriage and the times we spent together. It was a real bonding experience. From that day on, he has been really attentive towards me. He would always come home as early as possible to simply have more time with me. We cuddle a lot and also make love. Except this time it feels new and different. Like a newfound love. He has been saying "I love you" to my kids. My son is confused, and my daughter just said, "Dad, you're weird." He is thinking about planning a trip for just the 2 of us because it has been really long since we had gone on a trip alone. So thanks to Reddit. You gave me a new version of my husband and probably strengthened my marriage with him. Not that there were problems, but I hope my husband would not be so haunted by his demons now. Nightmare neighbors scheme to steal our home ends in $200K karma. You won't believe what happened next. Before we begin, let's introduce the key characters. The entitled neighbor will be referred to as N in the future, and the entitled neighbor's spoiled kid will be referred to as S for entitled son. The former owner of our house, known as P.O., will also appear in this story, albeit in a minor role. Also, keep in mind that it's been over 15 years since we acquired the house. So unless otherwise specified, you can infer that most events occurred over a somewhat long period of time. Let's get started. In order to appropriately build up to the climax and establish the stage for the events that occurred, I must first provide some history. Most of this occurred before we purchased and moved into this home. Anne owned a huge plot of land down the road from a popular recreational lake in our community. I say down the road, but it's quite a distance away. Even though Anne lives on the only road that connects many lakefront estates and resorts, as well as the most popular boat dock on this side of the lake, the properties here aren't so expensive that ordinary people can't buy them. However, there are some incredibly valuable properties down the road, and very wealthy people pass by all the time. This will become relevant later in the plot. Karen, who was fairly affluent and had a considerable amount of property, decided to divide it into 4 nearly equal pieces when her children reached adulthood. One she handed to her daughter, who was surprisingly respectable given the rest of her family. Then she passed another part to S. She built residences for them on both properties, essentially following her children's requirements. Then, on the 4th piece of property, which did not include her own house, she built a little convenience store. This will also be useful later on. I'm not sure why, perhaps to avoid future disagreements, but she ended up giving her children the deeds to their various houses and properties. You probably know where this is headed. While the respectable daughter was pretty respectable, S, or should I say irresponsible son, was a party animal. Everyone in the area at the time despised him. He would host loud, rude late-night parties practically every night, keeping everyone awake. Because he was called on so frequently, the police must have had someone stationed nearby. It undoubtedly did not help his entitlement that Mommy paid all of his bills for him. She maintained everything in her name, including water, electricity, and rubbish. They all went to her mailbox, well, except one. Because the property was in his name, so were the property taxes, which he never paid to Anne and instead ignored. I suppose Anne either didn't think about it or expected he would pay for it himself. In any case, it was not surprising when the police arrived at his residence, but it was when he did not return and the house was auctioned off. At this stage, the house was in disarray. There were holes in the drywall, and the living room floor had a large hole that led down into the garage basement. The kitchen floor and subfloor had to be completely redone, and nearly all of the walls were covered in muck. His recklessness and partying habits essentially rendered the residence unlivable, according to the banks. As a result, the only people who could afford it were those willing to pay for it themselves. Enter Pomper Po was a house flipper. Not one of those large, affluent ones you see on TV, but rather a hobbyist. He retired and flipped properties to stay engaged and active. Po would acquire a house like this at an auction for a low price, fix it up, and then resell it. While he worked on it, he would live off the proceeds from the prior property. Typically, by the time he completed mending one and purchasing the next, his profit had almost run out. Any remaining monies would go into an emergency savings fund, which he described as nothing exceptional. Anyway, we were looking for a new apartment, but we couldn't afford anything too pricey. We spotted this place for sale on a website and thought it was great. It was the perfect size, in the ideal area, and even down the road from the lake, where we enjoy fishing and boating. So, everything appeared to be ideal in practically every regard. We were a little concerned about the pricing, which had not yet been mentioned on the internet, but it wouldn't hurt to look into it. We drove by to look at it and discovered Poe working on it. We came in to say hello and inquired about the price. He indicated that he intended to fix it up and sell it, and that his realtor had recently placed it to the website's database to make the process quicker and more efficient when he was ready to sell. Anyway, we sat down and had a lovely conversation with him, just being cordial, and he enjoyed the company. We stated that we would be happy to buy it from him for a reasonable price, given its current state and the effort he had previously put into it. He had it approximately halfway built. We mentioned that we wanted to finish it and make it our lifelong home. He declined, claiming that he had previously received several offers for it and did not feel comfortable selling it to us before it was finished. He suggested we could buy it at full price when he was finished. So we politely thanked him and left our phone number, asking him to call us if he changed his mind. which he assured he would. Less than 2 weeks later, we received an unexpected call from him. He claimed that his sister had fallen ill in another state and that he wanted to go see her. He would not have the time or patience to complete the house. He said that the house was not up to code, but if we could find a means to acquire it, he would gladly sell it to us for a fair price. We eagerly agreed and began searching for banks. We had a few connections through a realtor acquaintance, who actually helped us find a bank prepared to lend us the money to buy the house, subject to a few restrictions. Essentially, we would have 2 weeks to get the house up to code. Otherwise, they may default on the loan and auction it off. After describing the problem to Poe, he pledged to help as much as possible. He couldn't do any work on the house because he was in such a hurry, but he did explain exactly what we needed to do to get it up to code and fulfill the very minimal criteria. He told us how much time, effort, and money it would require. He even promised to aid us in another way. We took out a loan for twice the amount he asked for the house, and he returned the other half. We utilized that money to restore the house. After all of his hard work, the house was so close to being code compliant that we could have done it ourselves. But, just in case, we called in several pals and finished it in half the time. After getting everything up to code, there was still a lot of work to be done. So we spent several months rebuilding flooring and subflooring, rewiring cables, mending cracks in the walls, and replacing old.
you you.